All right, if folks can get their seats, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all so much for joining here. This is our third of 3 meetings doing outreach, public meeting here to inform state decision-making in response to the governor's executive order on what to do given federal rollbacks on our clean vehicle policies in California. And my name is Ethan Elkind. I direct the climate program at UC Berkeley Law School's Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment. I am here as a facilitator for this discussion. This will be a dialogue. As I mentioned, it's our third of 3, so we've taken all the learning from the first 2, and hopefully this will be our best one yet, although we had some very productive meetings. First in Fresno last week on Monday, where we focused primarily on agriculture and agricultural use cases. And then on Wednesday, we were in Sacramento at Cal EPA headquarters, where their resources board is located, focused on light-duty vehicles. Today's meeting is really focused on infrastructure and secondarily on ports. That's not to say that we don't want your feedback on whatever issue you came here to talk about today, but just so you know that those are 2 of the topics that we're hoping to get some input on in particular. And this will be a dialogue. It's not just an open public comment type meeting. We really want to have a thematic approach to this. So I'll have a series of questions posed to all of you after we hear from the panelists, and we'll have an ordered discussion, which I'll talk about when we get to that point. But just wanted to flag that in advance. In terms of just some basic housekeeping, I want to note that we are here on Zoom, although we're not going to be taking any comments from those listening in on Zoom, but it is being recorded. And in addition to the recording, there's note taking going on by agency staff here in the room, so your comments are being memorialized that way. Ultimately, the purpose here is to just help inform the state's ultimate report to the governor on the steps that can be taken. So that's how the feedback will be used. Also just want to note that if in the course of the discussion today, you're not able to bring up a point that you really want to make, I just want to let folks know that there's an opportunity for written comments as well. If you go to the California Air Resources Board website and you go to their ZEV forward page, you can just Google that, you'll see an opportunity to submit comments that way. And I'll make a note of that at the end as well. Just another housekeeping note. First of all, if any of you need to use the restroom, out the hallway here or out those doors, go to your left. And then behind the video screen, there's a whole bank of restrooms there. And I also want to call up on Zoom here the Spanish translation slide. So if anyone needs translation assistance, these are the instructions for accessing the language assistance. So we'll leave that up there for just a moment. So now I want to introduce a couple individuals to provide just some basic opening welcoming remarks for everyone here and tuning in online. So first, I want to introduce Wayne Nastri, Executive Officer of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Wayne, yeah, please come on up.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's great to be here. Unfortunately, the air quality isn't as good as it should be. And as you may well know, our air quality is the worst in the nation when it comes to ozone. Good afternoon. My name is Wayne Nastri. I'm the Executive Officer of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And the challenge that we have before us is immense when it comes to meeting the federal standards. We have over 1,400 premature deaths in our region because of poor air quality. And our region encompasses all of the urbanized portions for the greater Los Angeles County, all of Orange County, and the urbanized portions of San Bernardino and Riverside County. And the challenge that we have before us is that as much as we've reduced a lot of the pollutants from stationary sources, we have not been so successful when it comes to mobile sources. And with the recent action by the federal government to deny California's waivers, to pull back on the recent endangerment finding, make the challenge even more so. And let me put this into context. When we look at air quality here in the South Coast region, we could bring our stationary sources to 0, and we still wouldn't be in attainment of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And that points to the fact that nearly 80% of the smog-forming emissions are coming from ships, from planes, from trucks, locomotives. All of these things are things that we don't have direct control. And the even more challenging part is we have submitted into state implementation plans where the state, California, is committed to achieving emission reductions. And it is on the magnitude of over 120 tons per day, which is huge. And here we are today in Long Beach, home to the San Pedro Bay Port Complex, which is the largest single source of emissions in the state. And so when we talk about zero emissions, it's critical that we think about zero emissions on a holistic level, not just for the light duty market, but for the medium and the heavy duty market. And as we move forward in trying to assess what are the things that California can do, I really want to lead with two things: affordability and reliability. For too many people, electric vehicles are a dream. And for those that have made the investment in electric vehicles, especially on the heavy duty side, many would tell you that it's been a nightmare. And it's been a nightmare because they haven't been able to get the infrastructure in place to charge their vehicles. They haven't been able to get the service or the parts necessary to keep their vehicles running. And so when we think about deployment of vehicles and what can California do to make sure that it maintains its leadership role, we've got to make sure that we have reliability. We've got to have that reliability because so many people, what we've heard, will not make those investments on the fear that they won't be able to use a truck, that they won't be able to make an earning for their livelihood for that day, that they won't be able to get to work because maybe they don't have the availability to charge that vehicle. Or maybe that vehicle was just too expensive and it's not proving right. So we have to look at affordability and reliability within the infrastructure is so important because it's not just the electrical grid that we need to look at. Because as we all know, electricity is a very clean source when generated in such a fashion, but we also need to look at other sources of clean energy, including hydrogen. And here in the ports, when we're looking at the shipping sector, we see a lot of ports trying to move toward a hydrogen fuel to get us toward those zero emissions. So how are we going to deliver hydrogen to the ports? How are we going to deliver hydrogen to the energy facilities so that they have cleaner fuels? And then as we look to increasing the amount of clean fuels that are available, we also have to make sure that we don't skip any of the technologies. I know there's a tremendous desire to go straight to zero, but sometimes we have to take a few steps. Sometimes we have to skip before we can actually get to that full run. And again, to me, that is addressing the reliability and affordability, particularly within infrastructure for all sectors, whether it be light duty and heavy duty. And we've got to do it in a way where we're consistent, because I can tell you one of the worst things that we as regulators can do is to devise a rule, to have that rule approved, to implement that rule, and then say, wait a minute, we're going to have to back up. Because what that does is create further uncertainty. And it says to those who are not going to make the investments to come into compliance that that's a smart bet. And it says to those that are willing to make the millions of dollars in investments necessary for clean energy, that maybe we shouldn't. Because if the government is going to change the rules midstream, we're not going to make those investments. So we need to be consistent in how we apply those rules. And we need to keep our promises, the promises to the community. I know one of the things that's been asked is, how do we uplift all communities? How do we not leave certain groups behind? And I really believe that we need to reassess that whole process. And I can tell you that in many discussions that we've had with manufacturers, they tell us, your incentives are all wrong. Your incentives really should be focusing on getting maximum deployment of the vehicles. And that means working with the largest providers of vehicles. that doesn't necessarily sit well. But the point that they made to us that I thought had some clarity, if you will, is that by increasing the number of vehicles that can get deployed, you can increase the rate of the secondary market formation. You can allow for the increased reliability and provenness of the technology, and thereby create greater opportunities and confidence in those secondary markets for those people to acquire those kind of vehicles, confident that they can run, that the infrastructure is in place, and that they're affordable. So these are just some of the things that I urge you to consider thinking about. And I know finally the last issue that we always think about is funding. And how do we maintain funding? And I know you're familiar with some of the models in Colorado where delivery fees are associated with the delivery of products, whether it be from Amazon or other type of services. We think those represent good sources of mitigation funding, and that mitigation funding can then be used for incentives. But incentives alone cannot be the tool that we use to ensure that California remains its leadership in the marketplace.
To us, I can distinguish, but
Very distinguished comment, I'm sure. But as we continue to move forward to address these issues, I think there are a lot of good ideas I hope that you will hear today. I know I have some additional comments, but again, we wanted to welcome you to sort of lay some of the challenges that we have before you and the importance of achieving clean air and what this technology means to so many people. So again, welcome. I look forward to hearing your comments and participating in the discussion that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Officer Nastri. And now I want to welcome up Valerie Rodriguez, Field Representative from the Office of Assembly Member Gibson.
Good afternoon. My name is Valerie Rodriguez, Field Representative for Assemblymember Mike Gibson, who represents the 65th Assembly District and is the chair of the Ports and Goods Movement. I have been asked to appear on Assemblymember Gibson's behalf to provide a brief statement and to acknowledge the Air Resources Board's efforts to hold this public session here in the city of Long Beach. Assemblymember Gibson commends stakeholders here in the city of Long Beach for the extraordinary work they have done to further electric vehicle adoption in the state of California, and he regrets not being able to make it to today's public meeting. Assemblymember Gibson feels that with regard to the work that California has led the nation on, more effort is still required in our state to ensure an equitable transition to transportation electrification, particularly in the automotive, shipping, and trucking sectors. Pursuing California's ambitious statewide goals will require planning and innovation, and those processes must include all Californians. For example, 2 years ago, Assemblymember Mike Gibson was proud to author AB 844, which enabled more widespread adoption for zero-emission trucks. AB 844 was sponsored by California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara and was signed into law in 2023. Assemblymember Gibson also urges stakeholders to continue to engage the Air Resources Board on the effects of regulation, as well as infrastructure needs associated with the successful transition. Mr. Gibson particularly asked constituents to indicate how affordability or lack of affordability affects their participation in zero-emission vehicles or zero-emission vehicle technology. And he urges the Resources Board to place the needs of working Californians who may struggle to afford the costs associated with incentivized vehicles, and make sure that this is high on your priority list. Thank you once again to those who have took the time to join us here today. The success of a transition to light, medium, and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles requires a partnership with our community in order for it to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie Rodriguez from Assemblymember Gibson's office. We greatly appreciate the opening remarks here. And now we're going to turn to our panelists here. And we've got, first, I'm going to introduce California Energy Commissioner Nancy Skinner, also former legislator representing UC Berkeley, where I'm at. So pleased to have you up here with us.
Thank you, and good to see you all. Appreciate your attendance, and very happy that CARB brought together our Air Resources Board, brought together our various agencies who are here on the podium to do this listening tour and invite stakeholders and the public up and down the state to give us some input. I'm recent appointee by Governor Newsom to the Energy Commission, and my particular portfolio at the Energy Commission is all of the things to do with our zero emission vehicle transition. So my division funds the charging infrastructure, sets the reliability standards for chargers, does the projections on how many chargers we need, also does projections on the vehicle purchases, lots of that kind of stuff. And I have some things I wanted to say, but first I wanted to comment on our Air Management District Director's comments. I was very impressed, and I'm very, very happy that he reminded us that just here in this air district, there are 1,400 additional deaths a year due to poor air quality, due to air pollution. And now he focused very much on the ships and the heavy-duty vehicles and the larger sources of transportation emissions, because those are, in this area, in this immediate region, the most impactful. But there are also, as we know, many millions of light-duty vehicles on our roads. And those light-duty vehicles are also part of that percent that he described of polluting emissions in our state, air polluting emissions. And so this transition to zero emission vehicles, while lots of us talk about the climate protective aspects, yes, that's important, but the most immediate is that direct impact on our health. And that ability to know that we have within our power and our hands to lower that number of deaths. And so when he talked about the incentives, we needed to correct some of those, and that we needed to look broader at things like equity and things like, how we incentivize this market. It struck me because I've been thinking a lot about the fact that every transition to an EV that an individual makes, that a truck owner makes, that a company makes that has delivery vans or a large freight hauler, every single transition like that provides a financial benefit to all of us. And so if we use state funds to give an incentive for that transition, while it can sometimes be perceived as, oh, you're just helping that person do something, in fact, it is helping all of us, because that transition is what is going to allow us to get to the point where we have cut those deaths. And that's very immediate. So I always like to keep that in the back of my head. But I really liked these reminders because, part of my job is designing, who we will fund to have charging at their fleets. And it's been a big discussion. Do we give money to PepsiCo or Amazon, for example, some of the biggest companies in the world? And yet, if they all were to convert all of their big trucks and their delivery vehicles to EVs, not only would we make that huge sizable difference in air pollution, we would, as he pointed out, create a secondary market for used vehicles. So the similar, if we think about for individuals, why might we give a higher income person some money to purchase an EV? Well, because they might be more likely to buy a new one. And interestingly enough, 70% of Californians buy used cars. That's the only kind of car they buy. I'm one of those. I only buy used cars. Why? Who knows? My Depression era father, who knows? But if some people don't buy new cars, new EVs, there won't be any used cars for people like me to buy. So we need to seed those markets. So these are some of the things that I've been learning and picking up in these listening sessions. But what I put out as a challenge to you is, California has been providing support to this EV transition for over a decade, and it's been effective. We're the leader in the US. We're the leader. We were the game changer in why automakers make EVs now, why more people buy them, you name it. But we're a little bit stalled. And we've got incredible attack from the federal government, from the Trump administration. So what's the game changer now? We're at a moment where it's no longer business as usual. What are the game changers that will get those fleet operators, those individuals, households, families, those that haven't yet moved over to the ZEV vehicle? What will do it? And that's the kind of thing I challenge you to bring us. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Skinner, laying down the gauntlet for us here. So next I want to introduce the Air Resources Board's Executive Officer, Dr. Stephen Cliff.
Thanks, Ethan. Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank our local hosts, the City of Long Beach, and to Valerie and Wayne for those opening remarks, and of course to the Commissioner for her welcome remarks today. I really appreciate everyone joining us. We're here today for one simple reason. It's our belief that California and all that live here are best suited to determine the actions needed to protect the air that we breathe. Yet this concept is being fundamentally threatened at a time when clean air efforts remain critical to our health, to our economy, and to our state's role as a technology leader. Today with you and our partner agencies, we will develop ideas and proposals to present to Governor Newsom at his request for rapid and effective actions to advance progress on zero-emission vehicle adoption in California, and to maintain our state's leadership in the face of illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and futile actions to limit our responsibility under the Clean Air Act. This is not a new role for California, nor a new priority for us. Clean vehicles have always been a centerpiece to our world-leading clean air efforts. What is new is the unprecedented assault on the state's right to improve the air that we breathe from those without the best interests of the health of our state, knowledge of our state's unique challenges, or appreciation for the economic benefits to the state from these ZEV markets. In the nearly 60 years since a bipartisan group of California legislators and Governor Ronald Reagan created the California Air Resources Board, the state's bold and innovative actions to clean the air have proven time and time again the wisdom and value of our policies. It was a California scientist working at a California university and observing the severe effects of air pollution and its effect on all Californians' quality of life, who discovered what creates smog. But more importantly, laid the foundation to systematically and effectively make progress on what seemed to be an unsolvable problem. Since that time, our population has doubled and vehicle use quadrupled, yet we have had the benefits of reducing many air pollutant levels by 75 to 99%. Although California actions have dramatically improved air quality, fueled economic growth, and given rise to entirely new industries, we now need to develop new approaches to ensure progress towards clean air is maintained as we fight back. We need doable and durable ideas to ensure emission reductions that are needed to meet national and state air quality standards and to address climate change, continue and accelerate. It's our legal and moral obligation and in our state's best economic interest. Today, we're here to discuss how to best meet this challenge and how to best move forward and continue that momentum. The discussion that we'll have today will lead to formal recommendations that will be delivered to Governor Newsom next month in response to an executive order that he issued in June. And for this session, we have a special focus, as Ethan mentioned, on ideas related to ports and infrastructure and actions that will accelerate benefits to communities throughout Southern California. With your help and with the help of those you represent, we are committed to continuing to pursue the pursuit for clean air and a more sustainable future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cliff. And next I want to introduce from the California State Transportation Agency, Deputy Secretary Christine Casey.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ethan, for the introduction. As Ethan said, I'm Christine Casey, Deputy Secretary for Freight Policy at the California State Transportation Agency. I'm very pleased to be here today on behalf of Transportation Secretary Tokes Omishakan to discuss how CalSTA can double down on our efforts to advance zero-emission vehicles in response to the governor's recent executive order. The order comes, as others have said, at a critical time in the wake of actions by Washington that undercut California's long-standing policy authority to advance the adoption of clean cars and trucks, and we can't let these setbacks stop our progress on this critical transition. CalSTA's interest in clean vehicles is grounded in what we call our core 4 priorities: safety, equity, climate action, and economic prosperity. During this Newsom administration, California has made historic progress on adoption of electric vehicles, growing from the early adopter phase into mainstream use by millions of Californians. We've also worked to develop the market for medium and heavy-duty ZEVs, investing in infrastructure and incentives to enable fleets to purchase hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric trucks and buses that meet their operational needs. CalSTA has worked systematically to support that progress through our policies and programs. So I'm here to share what CalSTA's role is. State law gives CalSTA department several forms of authority relevant to the advancement of ZEVs. Firstly, as an infrastructure owner, CalSTA oversees the construction, management, and maintenance of state-owned transportation infrastructure by Caltrans. We own and permit charging stations on our right-of-way and administer vehicle weight regulations, tolling, and managed lane programs that shape vehicle use. As a large fleet manager and employer, CalSTA oversees departments, including Caltrans, DMV, and the California Highway Patrol that are helping scale up ZEV deployment by procuring them for our very own fleets and building charging infrastructure to support their use by employees. As a funding agency, we allocate transportation funding across many state programs through Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission, supporting conventional infrastructure as well as fleet and public charging infrastructure and electric trains and buses. Areas of focus for ZEV funding include the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, and the recent one-time Port and Freight Infrastructure Program. We also administer federal transportation funds received by the state, including the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure or NEVI program with our partners at the Energy Commission. Finally, as a motor vehicle regulator, CalSTA oversees the safe operation of vehicles in California through the Department of Motor Vehicles, administering the licensing and registration of drivers, vehicles, dealers, and manufacturers. And the new Motor Vehicle Board interfaces with vehicle dealers to ensure consumer protections. In response to the governor's executive order, CalSTA staff is evaluating all of the opportunities that exist under these authorities to further accelerate ZEV adoption. I'm eager to hear suggestions from stakeholders today for new creative ways CalSTA can enable that progress. We need your insights on what barriers need to be lifted to make EVs the most attractive choice for individuals and fleets, and where the leverage points lie that would really move the needle on scaling up clean vehicles. In times like this, it's important to think outside the box and look at all the tools in our toolkit as a state. Thank you for being here to inform our efforts today.
All right, thank you very much for that. And next, last but definitely not least, I want to introduce from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, Gia Vason, who is Deputy Director for Zero Emission Vehicle Market Development.
Great, thank you, Ethan. Good afternoon, and I'm very glad to be with you today. As Ethan mentioned, I'm representing GoBiz, as we call it. For the first half of the meeting, I'll be here for the entire meeting. Our GoBiz Director and Senior Advisor to Governor Newsom, Dee Dee Myers, is going to join us a little bit later, so we'll hear from her then, and she'll have a chance to hear from you as well. So in the meantime, I just am going to take a quick moment to briefly introduce GoBiz, just for those who aren't familiar, and you'll have a chance to hear more about our perspectives when Director Myers comes. So GoBiz serves as California's lead agency for business establishment and expansion, as well as job creation in what's now the 4th largest economy in the world. So we help with incentive identification and navigation. We perform site selection services. We have an office specifically assisting small businesses. We house the iBank, which is the Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. and we collaborate with industry to solve challenges in our state's key economic sectors and more. One of those key sectors in California, and what brings us here together today, is zero emission transportation. So I lead our zero emission vehicle market development office, and we really work to coordinate efforts across state agencies, to collaborate with the local jurisdictions in our cities and counties, and incorporate the industry perspective and learnings into our decision-making processes to really overcome and advance the ZEV market. And this is all, of course, in service of achieving our air quality, our climate, our economic, and our social goals here in California. So I'll leave it there for now and look forward to our discussion. Really, thank you so much for being here.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for those opening remarks. And now we're going to launch into the dialogue part of it. Let me just sort of set up the basic process here. I'm going to have a series of questions, 4 questions total. They're already posted on our website that I will put on the screen in a moment. And those of you who want to respond via your phones, the written response will have the opportunity to do so. Our thinking is that not everyone necessarily feels comfortable speaking into the microphone, or might feel more comfortable just writing out ideas. So we're trying to provide multiple types of input. And you'll see the instructions for answering the first of those 4 questions. We will be going until 5 o'clock. We have a hard stop at 5 o'clock. We'll take a break right around 3 o'clock. I'm not going to promise right at 3, but right around that time. We'll take about a 15-minute break at that point. And these 4 questions are really designed to have a bit of a sort of an ordered approach to the discussion. I do want to take a sort of facilitator's prerogative that if anyone is starting to speak sort of off topic to the question posed or taking a lot of time, we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate everybody's comments. So I don't want to be the bad guy, but I just want to reserve that right to really encourage everyone to just speak kind of on point here. Those 4 questions are not necessarily holistic in terms of the types of feedback that the agency leaders here want to receive, or that you may have in terms of the feedback you want to provide. So we'll also be able to leave the floor open for other topics, other questions as well. But we think these 4 questions will help us guide the discussion. Just to preview them, I'll be asking the number 1 action that you think California can take to maintain momentum in the zero emission vehicle market. Then second, I'll ask what types of programs that can meet air quality and climate targets that you would like to see state agencies assess and implement. Third, I'll ask the types of incentive programs other than financial support that you think could encourage more adoption of zero emission vehicles. And then last, for those formal written questions, I'll ask what are some of the principles to ensure we don't leave any Californians behind as we move forward on some of these policy ideas. And again, they're all on the website and you'll have a chance to see them, but I just don't want to hide the ball here. I want to give you all a chance to have a bit of a preview as to what the questions are. One last thing, if you would like to speak, we'll have some time just for written responses to the questions, but if you do want to speak, we've got 2 roving assistants with microphones, so you don't need to line up at the podium. Just raise your hand. We'll try to distribute, speaking of not leaving anyone behind, we'll try to distribute the microphones equitably across the room, but that's the way that we will handle that. And we'll get started now with the first question. So let me go ahead and get my screen here. Okay, so hopefully, there you go. So first question, as I mentioned, what is the number 1 action that California can take to maintain momentum in the zero emission vehicle market? And you can see the different instructions for filling this out. Hopefully you can all read that. I know the website and the text are a little bit small, but you can also use a QR code. I'm going to give people just a few minutes to get access to the question. As responses trickle in, I will switch to a screen. We'll be able to see in real time those written responses coming in. They're not edited. They're just coming in real time. We're not doing a word cloud kind of thing here. So you'll be able to see what your fellow attendees have to say in response. And one final note is I'm going to make sure I give space for the panelists to respond to people's comments and questions. We're not guaranteeing a dialogue here. Panelists may not have much to say in response, just taking in the feedback and the input. But to the extent that there's an opportunity for dialogue, I definitely want to encourage that between you and the folks here on the panel. So hopefully people are feeling comfortable using their smartphones, getting the question. Let's take a look, see if we have some responses coming in. I see we have a few. I'll kind of summarize some of the themes here, and then we'll go ahead and take any verbal comments that people have following up on this. So we're seeing funding, incentives, financial incentives, market certainty. Common theme here already now with funding. Give people a few minutes, like I say, to fill this out. In-depth comments, I'm sure, are being typed away right now, but we're also fine with 1 or 3 word comments too. More public charging, equity, infrastructure, yes, theme of this meeting. Commitment from the automakers to continue to build and sell the vehicles. More on the sort of funding incentive. There's our first long answer, lead electrification through state fleets. And we're also capturing all of this feedback. This is all saved here. So even though the answers are going down on the screen, it doesn't mean they're lost to the ether here. We're saving all these answers. All right, feel free to continue to type out responses. This is great to get this feedback. And I know folks online as well, I believe, are able to answer this question here about the #1 action California can take to maintain momentum. I want to go ahead and open it up now if folks have verbal comments, verbal commentary on this. Anything you're not seeing, anything you want to explain more, maybe you already went ahead and filled this out. So yeah, hand raised there in the back. I see another one up here. You could, if we just pass the microphone, you just, oh, there we go.
Thank you. Chris Chavez, Deputy Policy Director at Coalition for Clean Air and also resident of Long Beach. Before I begin my comment, I do want to actually elevate a point that Executive Director Nasri made about the 1,400 people that die annually prematurely due to air pollution. You can see that just by looking at my own community. I live in, again, Western Long Beach. And if you look at the Memorial Care Long Beach Health Needs Assessment, my neighborhood has an 8-year shorter life expectancy than somebody on the eastern side of the city. And we're adjacent to the freeway, the 710 freeway. We're downwind of the ports. And yes, there are multiple sources of pollution, but transportation certainly has its role, being the largest source of pollution in California in terms of health harming pollution, climate pollution, and carcinogenic diesel particulate matter. In terms of the question, a couple of the answers I included also in the written response is one is accelerating the retirement of zero emission trucks, making sure that those trucks are off the road, or the retirement of diesel trucks, not zero emission trucks, my apologies. Requiring the retirement of old heavy duty diesel trucks is probably the single biggest step that CARB can take to reduce air pollution in Southern California. This measure is going to be all the more important due to the federal assaults that we are seeing, the waivers, getting rid of the waivers, not approving waivers. All those things are really going to mean that California needs to do more on its own to reduce air pollution. Also, we just want to elevate the need to ensure that the money that the state does spend is aligned with our climate and clean air goals. And one of the big examples of that is in our infrastructure programs like TCEP, where a lot of that funding is being used for polluting projects, highway expansions, other things that contribute to air pollution. So using that funding more for infrastructure for zero emission vehicles is also going to help further accelerate the deployment and usage of zero emission vehicles in the region. So just wanted to offer those 2 comments in that additional context. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have another questioner there.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Brown. I'm head of government affairs at Harbinger Motors. I've had some great conversations with a lot of you folks up there. I am going to maybe not focus so much on my company, but perhaps something more broad. The truth is, what California really needs is to stand up to what is happening in the federal government, to fight clearly that the CRA disapproval of the waivers is inappropriate. That litigation, frankly, will last throughout at least the next year and a half, possibly, unfortunately, throughout all 4 years of the president's tenure. But you need to stand up for the other 177 states. The fact is that California is that shining city on the hill. And we need to make sure that we stand strong so that way other states do not withdraw their support for EVs. They do not withdraw their support to ensure that their air is clean and clear for their communities. And so that way, when we do have friendly legislation and regulations, we're not starting to make friends then. We're running out the gate, repairing the damage that has been caused by this administration.
Thank you for the comment. I just want to see if there's any thoughts and response here from the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Thanks very much, Chris. Agree with you that we need to fight. And in fact, as you probably are aware, we do have litigation against the U.S., the federal government, on the illegal resolutions. As I noted in my opening remarks, that we believe they're unconstitutional, and we do stand with those 177 states. We actually are in litigation with them, so agree that they have been critical partners in the development of the technology and in furthering this work.
For Chris of the Coalition for Clean Air, appreciate your comments, and I'm sure you're aware, but so everyone else is, we agree with you on aligning our climate goals with our transportation investments. And in fact, we have an initiative to do just that through the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, which was another executive order from several years ago, and we just released our CAPDI at 2.0, and one of the recommendations and actions was to update the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program that you referenced, update those guidelines to align some of the, to ensure that passenger VMT, vehicle miles traveled, impacts are mitigated in those projects. So again, getting towards that point of aligning our transportation investments with our climate plans. So thank you.
All right, so we've got a couple points here on funding and on fighting for the other states involved. Other comments people want to make? I saw a hand up there. Let's see, in the fourth row back.
I think
Oh, but we already have someone
I've
teed
got
up.
the
Okay,
mic.
sure.
I don't
Go
know.
ahead.
I'll be quick. Hi, I'm Laura Ranger from the California Electric Transportation Coalition, and welcome to Long Beach. It's great to see you guys here. CalETC is submitting written comments, so I'll keep my comments relatively brief today, but open for more information. If it's needed, please do reach out. First, I just want to thank you for hosting this meeting, and especially thank CARB staff who have been working very hard on this. CalETC recommends that the 60-day plan first urges the legislature and the administration to support existing clean transportation programs with a continuous GGRF appropriation. Specifically reaffirm the administration's strong support for the low carbon fuel standard. We propose that the Energy Commission, in consultation with the utilities, design and implement a tool to facilitate utility access to much needed data to enable electrification. We also recommend directing the limited state dollars and taking supporting actions that build the market for ZEVs. We don't support income caps or limitations on HOV stickers versus the rebate. At this point, we strongly suggest that we get as many people into cars as possible. We also recommend establishing a statewide permitting process for EV permitting and providing a tax exemption for ZE trucks and school buses for 5 years. We do have some other more granular recommendations regarding submetering and how to make that protocol more effective with regard to the PUC's regulations. And we also strongly urge you to support the local and public utilities that are still subject to the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation, and set them up so that they can succeed and demonstrate to the rest of the state that that regulation is ready to be successful for all EVs. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Just a quick follow-up there, since the prompt was the number one thing you would do, and there was a lot of ideas there. Just curious if you have a a favorite number one out of those?
No, but I can't pick between GGRF and LCFS. We have to maintain those two programs. So if push came to shove, we would say both. They need to work together. Thanks.
Thank you. Any thoughts here from the panel? Okay, move forward. Yeah, let's see. Oh, we've got a person with a mic in the back, and then we'll get to the front row, I promise.
Hi there, good afternoon. This is Lauren Nguyen from LADWP, and I echo what she was saying is that we want the support to be continued for the LCFS and the GGRF program. These fundings with our program since 2011 have put in 50,000 chargers. And if we didn't have the funding, we would have to go against the Prop 26. And, you know, it would be harder to incentivize our low-income communities. And so I urge you to continue both programs and so that our children could continue to breathe fresher air. Thank you.
Thank you. See if we can get the microphone down here to the fourth row.
Hi, James Tong, CEO of Mitra EV. We are a provider of fleet electrification for small and medium-sized businesses. I've been doing fleet electrification for 8 years. Prior to that, 7 years in distributed solar. I worked with the Department of Energy at the time to drive down the cost of solar and really spread adoption. And we're seeing something similar here in the fleet electrification space. In fact, we just completed a DOE-funded study on fleet electrification. If there's one thing that came out of this study is education. I mean, what we're finding is that people who actually 93% of the 400 survey responses we had, sorry, let me get this straight. There's a segment of adopters. And those who have said they are considering adopting or will adopt or have adopted said they are very knowledgeable about EVs. That suggests there's an education gap. And those who are saying, hey, they're not adopters, they haven't looked at EVs at all. And what we're finding is that EVs are very cost competitive, especially at the smaller applications like the Class 2B, Class 3 vehicles. But most of these fleets don't even know that. And once they start learning about these advantages, they adopt. Even importantly, once they adopt their first vehicle, they're more inclined to adopt subsequent vehicles. So a cost-effective way of driving adoption, especially among businesses, is make that entry point easier. Educate the fleets. Use the channel partners. They get a lot of information from dealerships, for example, we found overwhelmingly so. Arm the dealerships with information, right? And get them to adopt even that first 1 or 2 EVs. Because once they adopt that first 1 or 2 EVs and realize the cost advantages, they're more likely adopt even more EVs. And this includes the larger EVs. So what we see is that a lot of the fleet starts with the easier vehicles like the Class 2B, Class 3, and then they move on to the Class 4, 5, and 6. And moving on to those may not even require incentives. But what may be required is incentives to educate and get them over the hurdle for the first adoption. And I'm happy to share this study. We'll post it in the comments.
Thank you. Yeah, the outreach education definitely echoed as well in the written comments. Any quick thoughts on that? Yeah, Gia.
Please. Just a reflection there. I think, yes, I think that the first point of contact often are the dealers, and we have heard there's a wide variety of experience going from dealer to dealer, both positive and negative. So I agree with you. The new motor vehicle board is actually launching a campaign and program to work directly with the. So I'm not suggesting that that's enough, but I think that your comments are on point, on the right track for how to really engage some people. Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, go ahead.
The point about companies or fleet owners not yet appreciating the benefits of the EV transition is accurate. but it's similar to individuals. What we've seen in a lot of studies is that there's a lot of misinformation and like fears that people have about converting to an EV that in practice are just, you know, not really there. But and of course, the most well-funded public awareness campaign right now is one that is trying to discourage California's very ambitious and strong EV transition goals, ZEV transition goals. So I don't know how many of you read, say, Cal Matters or Politico, and you see lots and lots of these ads, and they pop up on websites too about saying, you know, California should back away from this and all these different reasons why. And I think what the data shows is that those households that purchase an EV, you know, they may have two cars, they may have an ICE and an EV, and then they purchase an EV, and then they fall in love with it so much they will never, you know, when they go to replace that that combustion engine they have, they go to another EV. And so we need to get that, we need to counter the misinformation people have, and we need to really spread the word of just really how convenient and easy it is. And for example, the publicly accessible charging infrastructure now is far more reliable than it was. And many of us are still holding on to either a memory of or, you know, some news about unreliability that has really changed. So, so anyway, we need to do some public awareness on all aspects.
All right, let's see. I don't know if someone already has a microphone now. Looks like we've got someone with a mic there, and then we'll go in the back, in the front.
John McNamara, CR&R. We're a solid waste and refuse company here in Southern California. We operate the largest renewable natural gas anaerobic digester in the state of California, in Riverside, about 60 miles east of here. And we run about 700 renewable natural gas trucks. We definitely encourage you to continue with the LCFS and GGRF funding, really important for the program that we've developed and going forward for us. We're very interested in hydrogen fuel cell heavy duty trucks and hydrogen fueling, but there's a lot of, you know, we need to find those trucks, and the fueling is very, very expensive. And in terms of ACF, ACT, we definitely would want to talk to you more about how to incorporate our vehicles, which are very clean, low emission vehicles, into the program. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, hand up here and a hand in the back. I don't know if we have the microphone already to someone. Okay, we'll go there and then we'll make our way down.
Hello, Raul Fletes from LA Department of Water and Power. I'm a fleet services manager. I want to appreciate, you know, the work that you're doing to try to move this forward in EV. Being a large utility, we're the largest in the nation for municipally owned. We have a large fleet. We buy 1,200 vehicles at a pace every year. We engage with a lot of different manufacturers that are probably here represented today, and OEMs at the state and federal level. The challenges, and what, you know, particular to what you're asking for, is that there is a bit of a disconnect. And the issue that's happening is what we need as a fleet and what we need for our daily use and work isn't quite being developed in the marketplace right now. That's the biggest question that I get asked all the time from a lot of these manufacturers who are here, is why we're not adopting it faster. And the reason is that the equipment for the special utility fleet, it doesn't have the duty cycle for what we need. What's happened in the marketplace across the nation with the ACT and Omnibus that's come on board, there's been a bit of a pullback from the manufacturers in bringing equipment into California so they don't run afoul of the rules and what they need to do. And what's happened is that for us, we plan out multi-years in advance for all our purchase and procurements. Now those are in jeopardy. And, you know, and we're being forced into equipment that quite isn't where we need it. Now, we're big adopters. We have more 400 solely EV, a good portion of our, you know, class 8, 7, 6, and we're bringing them into par. We're bringing them into the system. But what's happened is a whole ecosystem, right? What they're selling is a chassis. It's incomplete. What we need is a final built vehicle. And I think that's the portion that's missing, is that these vehicles that we need don't come configured the way we need them in order to do our work. Oftentimes what happens, we have demoed multiple vehicles every month we do this. vehicles come and they're overweight. And most of the vehicles that you see in the marketplace are those box trucks and stake bed. That configuration allows for the most easiest because of the payload. Our configurations are not like that. We need to have the specialty booms equipment for both water and power, right? Our city, the amount of resources needed for water and power, we take power from Washington State, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, all these places Department of Water and Power is operating in. And alongside, we also do water. And we have our own Sierra Nevada where we bring water down to our aquifers. So we're the test case for a lot of these different OEMs, and we're working with them on all these projects to get the feedback that's needed to develop what we need. The smaller companies, unfortunately, right now, they're bringing markets to bear, and we're working with them. We've worked with several companies who have gone out of business before we can buy that unit that they were selling. And we're adopting and buying equipment that we know that isn't quite ready, but that's okay, because we're spurring the market to bring it on board. But what we're asking is that there is that disconnect right now. There is that issue that the equipment that's being manufactured and made isn't quite what we need right now. So the idea that there's ready available equipment that's needed is not actually there, not on all markets. I would say most of what you see is for the last mile delivery. That's why there's been such an adoption there, and it's such big pullback on our side, is it hasn't moved as fast. And I have the budget and the financial that my company allows us to really push that market. I know the mayor's office at the city has really pushed that green initiative, and we're all a part of that to make it forward. But unfortunately, the equipment that we're seeing isn't up to par. So what we end up doing is finding a truck or a piece of equipment, and we find another use for it. Luckily, in our fleet is so large that we do have that. Other municipalities only buy one vehicle a year. It is a financial catastrophe if they pick the wrong one, and then that company is gone, which happens a lot, even for name brands. So those things are things that have to be incorporated, and the reliability. We buy equipment that 2.5 years later, the architecture for the charging and the battery structure is no longer supported by the company because they moved on, and we're left with a piece of equipment that we can't use. So we need to work with that. That's what I would ask, is that we have that infrastructure and that communications, so we can have equipment that's needed for this market. And I would guarantee that adoption would be much more quicker. And then I'll make a pitch for, we just went through an event at Palisades, Eaton Fire as well. Our reliability, I was in the middle of that, and the whole time I was thinking, how do we do the work we have to do with the equipment that we have at hand? It is a challenge. So, I'll keep that in mind for us utilities. The reason for why this adoption is going to work is the fact that you have the electricity and the reliability for the things that you need. If we, the provider of the infrastructure, can't be there to do that reliability for the rest of it, it's going to be a problem. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate the feedback, and in particular, it's important to hear from fleet managers such as yourself who are actually experiencing these technologies and sort of the good and the bad, and where there are challenges. And I hope we can follow up with you to kind of learn a little bit more and things that we can do to help, at the state level, to help continue momentum, recognizing that there are some bumps in the road along the way. Thank you.
All right, we had a hand up in the back, way back there.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Jamie Hall, I lead policy for EV Realty. We're a California-based company developing, owning, and operating medium and heavy-duty fleet charging depots. So this discussion is very much top of mind for us. I guess my overarching recommendation is to just focus on scale across the board in our programs. And this means simple, streamlined incentives and regulations that let us really sort of start the market transformation. We need to come up with creative new regulations. Really excited to talk through some of those today. We need to keep fighting the good fight in the courts. All these things are going to take time. And in the meantime, we've got to get trucks on the road and chargers in the ground. There are a lot of incentive programs that we have today that are proven, that work. And I think, as Executive Director Nasri said, we need to focus those programs on maximum deployment. So for trucks, I think CARB's move towards allowing large fleets back into HVIP is a real step in the right direction. Just got to sort of simplify things and figure out how are we going to get the most vehicles on the road as quickly as possible so that we can start scaling up. On infrastructure, programs like the CEC's Energize program, simple, streamlined, get things built out quickly. Obviously, we need to fully fund these and whatnot, but I think it's really important. I think we sometimes in California have a tendency to overcomplicate things at this moment in the market. I think we need to try to avoid that temptation and just do whatever is going to quickly get as many vehicles on the road as possible. As Commissioner Skinner said, every one of these vehicles provides widespread benefits for all of us. So let's just sort of double down on simplicity and on what works while we figure out more longer term fixes.
All right. Thank you for that comment. Let's see, do we have someone with a microphone already? If not, we'll go here to the front.
I think we should both stand up. That's a great segue for me to say what I wanted to say. I think that the answer is, this sounds kind of loud. Is it too loud? No. I think that the answer is business. And I own a small company here in downtown Long Beach, right at the port. And we have some new technology that that could get 6,000 new EVs in the infrastructure immediately. And with just a small tweak in the legislation. And I'm just looking to work for somebody. I've never met anybody, and you guys are all super motivating. And I just want to be able to work with somebody to be able to get that technology in the ground. And we can get it done pretty quickly. And this is sort of the best place for me to be able to talk about it. But I hear a lot of complaints about the federal government. I hear a lot of complaints about legislation. I think that the answer is that we all have to get to work. And our company will do that, and I can do that in about 3 to 5 years, get about 6,000 EV locations into place immediately. So I just would like to work with somebody to be able to do it.
Yeah. Can we get your name?
Sure, I'll get you a card if you'd like.
Just for the
I'm sorry, I didn't get my name. My name is Dominic Ficarelli. I own a company called Diamond U Products. We're right up the street here.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please.
We'll have staff follow up with you. There's quite a few staff here. They can, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that this is perfectly situated for GoBiz to kind of have our ZEV team and all the services that we have in California for a small business. So, yeah.
Yes, please do pass around the business cards. All right. Let's see. Does someone have the mic already? If not, we can go to the middle of the aisle here. Yeah, right there. Man, the gentleman in the white sweater. Yeah, you can take it, and then 2 rows in front of you too.
All right, we'll figure it out. Good afternoon, Roman Partida Lopez with the Green Lining Institute. Thank you for hosting this today. The Green Lining Institute has submitted written comments to you all, so I won't go into all the details that we had in there, but I did want to highlight a couple of things as we're discussing this initial question around the #1 action, right? And I heard the real focus on climate and transportation. How do we align our climate and transportation goals? And as part of that, we can't forget that it has to be climate, transportation, and equity goals, right? I heard you all on the dais talk about focusing on equity and creating access for all, and yet I think we continue to miss the mark, right? And in how we make sure that all communities, especially lower income communities, benefit and participate in this transition. We started this work on electrification over a decade ago. We've seen billions of dollars in investments in the name of market transformation, and yet low income and communities of color have not received the benefit that all this investments have said they would provide. So we have an opportunity in front of us as we continue to figure out what these next steps are, to really center and prioritize equity, to really center those communities who have not been able to benefit, who have not participated in the programs that we have in front of us. And that's both talking about light duty, but medium and heavy duty as well, right? For our small companies who would benefit from this transition, who would need the state support. So I think as we continue our conversations, right, and we get to our last questions about principles, we can get deeper into that. But I think the #1 action is to ensure that equity is a core principle or core action that you all include in that, because it is really easy to then push equity to the side or address it on the margins when things like this happen. So with that in mind, the community has identified several recommendations and several priorities that can help move this forward, and both for light duty to medium and heavy duty. And so part of that is, one, really focusing in on how do we flex dollars that we already have to make sure that we're funding those programs that the community has identified as priorities, right? The state has AB 617, and even though an imperfect program, it has developed community emission reduction plans throughout the state that identify top projects and investments that they would like to see. So really thinking about how you leverage flex dollars and then to then advance the projects that have been identified in those serves. And then secondly, I would say that it's great that we're having this meeting today, and yet as I look across the room, a lot of community voices are not part of this. So as a follow-up, I would highly recommend that another action that you all take as you look to conclude this is to ensure that you are meeting with the community groups across the state to hear from them directly on what type of actions you all should be taking to address that and ensure that equity is at the core of the actions that you move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. We certainly recognize not easy for people to be here in the middle of a workday if this isn't your profession to be in the room here. So point well taken. Also do want to flag that our last question will be specifically on equity. So we look forward to getting specific ideas from all of you on ways to further equity as we think about policies in response. Just want to see if anyone on the panel wanted to respond to that comment.
I was just going to say, yeah, thank you. And I know we've had some back and forth about trying to get a meeting together specifically with community groups. So looking forward to seeing what we can get on the calendar. We've been, as you know, a little under the gun to get this report finalized and trying to do our listening tour at the same time that we're, pulling together the report. I will say that's not the end. We obviously are very committed to the work that we do. And you mentioned AB 617. Which continues to be an opportunity as well. So we look forward to continuing to do that work together and really appreciate that comment.
If we could, the gentleman with the right there with the white sweater, black stripes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Fernando Marquez, policy researcher with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. And I have a couple comments for this question. In PSETH, we recently finished conducting a track study where we assessed the needs for the zero emission vehicles transition, asking directly truck drivers and community members. And one of the main concerns of truck drivers for this transition is the infrastructure necessary. So one of the things to keep the momentum is to increase the incentives to create more charging stations, especially fast chargers for heavy-duty vehicles, which are, as we know, the most polluting heavy-duty vehicles based on fossil fuels. Another thing we found in our study that I had the honor to lead was that most of the truck drivers we interviewed, they couldn't apply to the incentives to get, for example, a zero emission truck because they were very difficult, time consuming, and this affects especially small fleets and owner operators. So making the application process easier or having more technical help for applicants that are owner operators or might not have an accountant, a lawyer to help them to navigate the systems. Another thing that could keep the momentum, and I think that CARB could do a better work on, it's combat misinformation. Fossil fuel industry constantly spreads false information and flawed data, especially on battery electric trucks, the total cost of ownership, inflating all of these numbers. And I think CARB should have a more proactive role in fact-checking all this misinformation. Even the ports just released, the Port of Long Beach and LA just released an EV truck feasibility assessment. And in the Impact Project Coalition that we are part, we did an analysis and wrote a letter with current and updated data from trustworthy scientific sources showing that their data was flawed. They inflated the total cost of operation and the limitation of battery electric trucks to favor hydrogen trucks and other so-called alternative fuels. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that we need to focus, I think CARB should focus the funding and the programs in battery electric trucks, because those are currently the real zero emission sources for vehicles. Over 93% of hydrogen that is currently produced in the US is dirty hydrogen, releasing polluting emissions to the air. Natural gas obviously is worse, so we think we should focus in battery electric trucks instead of other alternative fuels, especially when you are giving public funding for this type of programs. Thank you.
Just quick follow-up there. Any number one items of the few you mentioned?
I think all are equally important.
All right, lots of number ones. Any comments? Yeah, Christine.
Thank you for your comments. I'd be interested if you're able to share the results of that study. I think it's really important to understand where the drivers are and to meet them where they are. I know through our TSEP program awards that were just announced, a significant portion of that was for zero emission charging infrastructure. And some of those companies that are installing that are planning a trucking as a service model where the infrastructure and vehicle are bundled. And so that can kind of help some of these smaller owner operators get into a zero emission vehicle with more of a monthly charge instead of an upfront investment of the vehicle and then the worry about where they're going to charge. So I think that some of these investments that we're making will definitely help to those points. Thank you.
All right. See a bunch of hands up in the front row. Or second row, technically.
It almost feels like winning the lottery. Thank you all for being here, and it's good to see you, Senator Skinner. I still think of you as Senator Skinner, so I'm getting used to the new title. Look, while the recent federal actions are creating uncertainty, and I think combined with the state and local budgets, some of the economic uncertainty, some of the regulatory uncertainty, it's going to be challenging, right, for fleets to know what to do in this type of environment. So obviously leadership is going to be very important in guidance. The good news is that one way to optimistically look at this is you have 4 more years to plan. And we all knew that the transition would take longer than 4 years. So I always try to look at the bright side of things like that. But I also want to say, in that planning, we seem to be very successful in the 2B to 3 category. Something's working there. So, one of my suggestions is build off of that. The harder to get to, I think, classes are in the heavier classes. And that's where I think we really need to think about what do we do in between now and then, because Wayne made some very important observations that we are struggling in the South Coast to meet attainment. It's not just 1,400 people dying annually. In the ports, it's 1,500 in a million cancer risk, when cancer risk or acceptable cancer risk is 1 in a million. We need to solve not only the diesel death zone at the ports, but also along the corridors and the breathers in the Inland Empire. And let's not forget the people in the San Joaquin Valley as well, who suffer equally horrible air quality. I also think that Wayne makes a very good point that when we do regulation, we need to make sure it's done right to build confidence in the marketplace. And so I think that, we have some extra time to think about, what's working, what's not, and then correct. Some of the things I think that we could do is
look at the ACT and the omnibus, regardless of whatever the status is, and find out what's working. I would suggest that the two rules currently right now make it very difficult to buy a clean truck. And that's why we were looking at, or recommending to the Air Resources Board to expand the near zero emission definition to include the cleanest internal combustion engines as a part of that category. That may not be the solution, but it's a suggestion, it's a friendly suggestion. My concern is that fleets currently, under this uncertainty, are buying old diesels on the road to expand and meet their needs. They're not looking to buy, well, the current economy also is discouraging from buying trucks as well. So it's not just a simple answer to that, but it's something that we need to think about and encourage fleets to not purchase dirty trucks, but to purchase the cleanest trucks. I also think that a truck and bus style regulation may be another opportunity to move the market. And maybe it's, no truck older than 2015 potentially be allowed to be compliant on the roads. That's something that you could consider that would eliminate older diesels and motivate fleets to buy newer trucks, cleaner trucks, zero emission trucks. I also think we need to look at our timelines in terms of our regulations, in terms of ZEV adoption. Probably the current timeline is not realistic. And I'll give you an example. We have a station at the Port of Long Beach property's owned in Port of Long Beach. It's actually in Los Angeles. But we tried to get electric charging at that facility, and I'm not going to name a utility because that's not fair. But I'm just going to say it because I think this is not a unique situation to this one utility. But when we asked to make a connection to our site to provide electric charging, we were told it would cost $10 million because of the port and everything around it. So it's a tremendous challenge. And then furthermore, it would take 5 to 10 years to be able to deliver that power. So those are some of the things that we need to think about. And I think streamlining is going to be really important. Trying to figure out how do you deliver that power sooner than later. And then, just looking at my notes here, I'm wrapping up. I think we need to figure out how do we, no matter what we do, I think the gentleman from LADWP is right that not every application in the heavy duty space has a product available. So we need to design our policies to make sure that if not a ZEV, the cleanest option available, right? So if not an electric truck or hydrogen truck is available to deliver the zero emission outcomes, how do we ensure that they purchase the cleanest truck possible? What incentives, policies, other things that we can do to make sure that we're making progress? Because if we don't do that, I don't know how Wayne ever has a chance, or the South Coast ever has a chance of making attainment. And, I just don't buy the argument that trucks are all that clean currently. And there's there's this statement that trucks have cleaned themselves up 99% of the time, or 99% since 1988. Well, I graduated high school in 1988, and I'm closer to retirement than starting. So, it's frustrating for someone like me who's dedicated his entire career to dumping dirty diesel to see us slip. And I just would encourage you not only to keep pushing forward, but also to think about, let's not leave anyone behind by making sure that whatever this, if the choice can't be a ZEV, it should be the cleanest vehicle possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also graduated in 1988, so
All right.
I got you.
Gen X is represented in the room. It's good to confirm. Let's see, other hands, middle there, the fourth row back. Woman with her hand up.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa McGee with Tom's Truck Center, And we've been participating in the HFIT program for 12 years now, have submitted over 700 vouchers and redeemed over 500. And we represent 5 zero-emission OEMs, both on the electric side and the hydrogen side. Super active. It is our mission to be one of the leaders in the program and provide this choice. So we're heavily invested. I'm going to echo a lot of what Jamie Hall had said. The HFIT program, we all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the HFIT program. So I really want to commend CARB's team on much of what they've done. I think we just need to simplify it. It's become so difficult to support the fleets through the process, and we need to accelerate it. Time kills all deals. I don't know what the answers are, but you're looking for those types of solutions, so that could be one point. Without funding consistencies, investors like Tom's Trucks and other stakeholders are at a disadvantage. It might literally financially kill their own business model. So I think funding consistency is key to how these investors continue to support this market. We need to cover the incremental cost of these units. This is a risk. Even an extra truck with the on-the-hood program that HVIP have is still a risk. We just don't have enough data, enough confidence by the drivers, and enough players in the market to provide a reliable, robust application for these fleets to rely on. We need to consider the secondary market. These operators go to the secondary market primarily. 50% of the population of California medium-heavy registered vehicles are by small fleets that are going to go to that secondary market. So in the incremental costs, we need to consider the used truck sell price. We've lost the $40,000 tax incentive. We've lost the hard stick mandates. We need incentives that influence this choice, which is a choice. And participating suppliers with the equipment need to somehow find a way to support the useful life of that equipment, whether it's a charger or whether it's a vehicle. I don't know what the answers are, but we don't have the answers yet, and I just don't know how we're going to get there. Volume, volume, volume. Volume is what's going to take care of all of us. Units in operation are going to support the scalability by the OEMs for the vehicles. For those that know to get fuel, it's units in operations. We need those trucks on the road, and we need on-the-road hood funding, or on-the-road funding for those trucks. Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. We need hood funding, not scrapping funding. I still just think, even though these programs are helpful, until we get enough volume, enough units in operation, these customers are still at risk, and it's more difficult to support them with the scrapping program. Dealer advisor group. I really think that we could use a dealer advisor group. We have over 300 commercial dealers in California. I think we need a seat at the table. We're facing the customers every single day. I think it could provide some meaningful dialogue. Vehicle miles traveled. When I think of a solution, we've got the Class 8 trucks that travel on average 50,000 miles a year. They're all diesel. I think that's a solution and a low-hanging fruit. Also, when I think about the government entities that are facing this mandate, I think we need to reimagine what we're doing in that process. I don't know what the answer is, but we've got a pretty difficult RFP process. I'm not sure that it works so well. It's kind of antiquated. Small fleet eligibility. Domicile addresses, utility bills, charging are all requirements in the current HVIP process. Most of these small fleets can't provide that information. A try before you buy program, I think, is critical to how we create the experiences that are needed, get butts in the seats, educate, educate, educate. Certainly appreciate this process and open to participating going forward. Thank you.
All right, let's see, other hands. Got, so woman in the back there. She's got her hand up with the blue shirt. There, yes, yes.
Okay. Hi there. My name is Andrea. I'm with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. I just want to start by saying that I think one of the most important things you guys can continue to do is just to commit to zero emissions as loud as possible so that federal government, other states know. I just want to focus on that, especially in freight. I know we've talked about how freight, especially heavy duty, is some of the hardest sector to address, but I would say arguably it's the most important one to address. And so starting as soon as possible to work on issues around heavy duty, I think is important, especially because of the justice component of it. We work with frontline communities in the Inland Empire who are the most impacted by these heavy duty trucks. And so we can't be the last ones to see progress on that. We want to be the first. And on that note, then I think starting now on these future regulations are going to be really important. We know how long that they take years. Starting now on things like an ACF2, an in-use locomotive number 2, ACT2, whatever that might be, I think is really important. And I bring up rail specifically because although we are talking a lot about trucks, our rail system is incredibly dirty and it's super outdated. And there is a possibility there on mode shift that I think we don't look at enough to think about vehicles off the road and using less minerals through the use of an updated rail system. The other thing is emphasis in the cities where this transition is happening. I'd really love to see, I think education got spoken on a little earlier, but I would really emphasize education in these freight corridor cities is important. We try as much to do education to our local cities about the EV transition, but it's really hard. A lot of cities still think that bringing in a battery, a depot, an EV depot, isn't going to bring money to the city. They're not going to get a gas tax. That's not going to be helpful to cities that are probably already struggling budgetarily. So how do we work together on educating more of our cities and hearing from them directly about what do they need to help incentivize infrastructure projects to come in and to help support that business moving? And on that note, just supporting the existing EVs depots that are coming in are really important. I know that there's going to be an influx probably of more heavy duty trucks, whether it be through Tesla or through some of the other, big drops of heavy fleets. And so how are we talking to these depots and making sure that they're able to be successful in our communities? Like my colleague mentioned, we worked on this study and infrastructure came up as such a big deal, but also the cost of the trucks. So I really would like to see CARB address the price gouging of trucks because we know these trucks are being sold way cheap on the other side of the pond, and they're going for more mileage as well. So how are we making sure that these companies here are selling the product that they should be selling everywhere? Because I think the cost for these, especially these smaller truckers that might not be included in some of these regulations last time, need to be involved in the transition because we cannot have our immigrant low-income truck drivers be the last ones to use it when they are the ones breathing in some of the dirtiest diesel. And then I have some thoughts on incentives, but I'll leave that for later.
Thank you. Yeah, we will have prompt on incentives. Yeah, Dr. Cliff.
Thanks, Andrea. Question for you on the price gouging. It's something that we've highlighted and staff did a report to the board recently to daylight the difference between where the trucks are being sold in Europe versus here, and even kind of correcting for all the other information. You can see that they are higher here. Do you have recommendations for how you think we could do that, or what would be the most effective way to address that issue?
I don't think I have a direct answer, but I think we should have more conversations around it. And hopefully, I think this is something that will come up if you do have these conversations with environmental justice groups across the state. But I think we need to bring in the legislature to start thinking. I think there's other states that have been trying to address price gouging in other industries through their legislature. We should maybe think about something like that, or even looking at how Europe also addressed price gouging for the last couple of years.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, let's see, hand up right behind our last speaker there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Carter Rubin with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you for hosting this discussion. NRDC has submitted a list with all of our #1 recommendations, but I'll just uplift one that I don't think I've heard as much today.
We are recommending that the State Department of General Services developed a priority list of car manufacturers that are aligned with the state's clean air goals, that are working collaboratively to support the electric vehicle and zero emission vehicle transition. And that when the state is making its fleet purchases and when it is allocating incentives to members of the public or private parties to purchase electric vehicles, that those incentives or purchases are targeted at the list of manufacturers that are collaborative and cooperating with the state, and that we're not steering money to automakers that have been working at cross purposes with our goals and lobbying against our ability to regulate to deliver clean air for California. Thank you.
All right, other hands. Yeah, see one in the back. There.
Hi, good afternoon. Jacqueline Moore with PMSA representing marine terminal operators as well as vessel carriers that operate on the West Coast. We, along with CAPA, we did submit a letter already, but did want to take this opportunity to respond to your question here. And I want to speak a bit more broadly, so it's just not on heavy duty trucks, but equipment and vehicles as well. And I think we can all appreciate we are in a very, very tough budget environment. We've heard a lot today about funding, but I wanted to stress the fact on consistent and reliable funding. That's really what we need at the core of this. We have to be fully committed to fund the goods movement system. We are at an imperative time in demonstrations, especially for a lot of the equipment out in the maritime environment, as well as deployments themselves. So having that annual reliable stream of funding for both on and off-road vehicles in the GGRF spending plan is critical. And I also wanted to talk about access to funding. There are obviously many funding programs available in the state, but unfortunately, a lot of our members, the folks in the maritime system, actually don't have access. In the latest CTI funding plan meeting that CARB hosted maybe about a month ago, they are focused on small businesses and disadvantaged communities, which of course we highly, highly support. But the people that operate, cargo handling equipment and some of the other otherwise eligible equipment, they aren't able to access it. So we want to make sure that these programs that we do have established, that the folks that operate the equipment that we very much do want to transform to zero emissions have access to it. There's also an issue on cost effectiveness for some of the programs where, we're tier 4, we are already incredibly clean. So being able to then go out and buy a zero emissions piece of equipment, we just can't meet that cost effectiveness limit because we are already so clean. And just to end my comments, we love GGRF, we love LCFS. PMSA, we are actually the largest single registrant in the LCFS program in the entire state. So the maritime community greatly appreciates and participates in that program. And we look forward to working with all of you on the dais up there on the ZEV effort and on the various other programs that we participate in. Thank you for coming here to Long Beach locally.
Thank you for that. We'll take a couple more on this, then we'll move to the second question. Let's see, I see a gentleman in the green shirt, and then we'll go across the aisle.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cristian Tapia Delgado. I'm a climate campaigner with Pacific Environment and a downtown Long Beach resident. Pacific Environment is grateful for California's leadership in moving forward with its clean air commitments, in spite of all the challenges that we're facing at the federal level. With the federal administration revoking 3 critical California waivers under the Clean Air Act, it's vital that CARB stands strong in ensuring that the public is protected from transportation-related pollution, including off-road emissions like shipping. If we were to open up the Cal Enviro screen map, you'd see that we're currently in and surrounded by communities that are in the 90th percentile of pollution burden. That's attributed to the ports, freeways, rail yards, and other industries that folks have mentioned that facilitate goods movement through our communities. And of course, these operations are vital for our economy, but we cannot subsidize the cost of these operations with people's health, especially when cleaner technologies are already available or becoming available for a lot of these sectors. And with outcomes coming from the International Maritime Organization, as well as the OGV transition rulemaking that's expected to kick off this fall, it's vital that CARB move forward with charting a pathway to in-transit zero-emission shipping. At the same time, we must also protect existing regulations like the historic at-berth regulation and commercial hovercraft regulation, which are currently under attack by fossil fuel interests. CARB's analysis of these shows that these regulations provide significant health benefits, avoid premature deaths, protect workers and on-vessel passengers, as well as the surrounding communities from exposure to diesel and other combustion-generated air pollutants. And here in the San Pedro Bay, OGVs and hovercraft combined continue to make up over half of the emissions at ports. And so we need to be making sure that we're using every tool at our disposal to reduce emissions from shipping and help clean up the air standards for our communities and ensure that we're prioritizing public health. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, across the aisle, there's a hand up. Actually, two hands up there. We'll go other side right there. The gentleman with the down closer to the second and third row on the aisle here. We have two hands up. We'll if we can keep relatively brief, we can get through these two questions or two comments. Yeah. And
hi, my name is Bill McClinton. I am the executive director for ZEV California, which is American Brotherhood aimed toward education. I'm representing another side of transportation. There are 936,000 registered motorcycle riders in the state. And I just have one simple response to that great question. In order for to adopt the battery powered or a different type of fuel to move a motorcycle, I'd say you need a bigger battery. You need a battery with more longevity to it. And that's really a simple answer to it. Thank you.
thank you. And then right behind you is do you mind passing the microphone?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sam Wilson, Senior Analyst with Union of Concerned Scientists. Thanks for being here today in Long Beach. And I don't know if the folks online can hear this, but we're definitely suffering a little bit of a slap echo in the room. And it kind of makes us all sound like John Lennon, which is kind of cool, but that's beside the point. In this line of work, I feel like we rarely hear agreement from academics, enviros, community groups, industry, and regulators. But one thing that I consistently hear is that zero emission trucks at ports are a zero regret situation. And so, I think we'll get into a lot of the individual solutions, but just to the, number one question, that was really the only thing that kind of popped to my mind. But, in that instance, we have a huge environmental impact from public health, environmental justice. There's a significant potential for return for drayage fleets there. So, and in addition to that, it's the nucleus of our freight system. And so I would just encourage the state to really focus on legally durable, financially sustainable, and expanded ways to accelerate zero emission deployments of ports. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the comment. Sorry about the John Lennon effect there. We'll see if we can troubleshoot that in the break. Maybe we'll take one more verbal comment on this. We still could take written comments. So is there any final word here? Yeah, gentleman there, the hand up.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Ostrander from Electric Vehicle Choice. We're a small local dealer. We deploy zero emissions commercial vehicles last 5-6 years. Kind of what everybody else is saying, a lot of it's been reliant on regulatory and incentives. So with ACF being sidelined, we're definitely looking towards the incentives to keep going. I think it's a tough sell for end users. So when we're trying to sell these things, it's I guess the incentives are part of it,
But the tax credits that we're losing, maybe the state could look at doing a state tax credit to offset the W-45. And then I would also say continue the enforcement on the diesel side. Clean truck check has definitely opened up a lot of opportunity. A lot of trucks getting bin blocked that were flying under the radar that weren't compliant. And then I would also say the 13-year useful life permit. I'm not sure if that's something you guys can leverage, but continue getting the older trucks off the road. And that might help also get people to be more open to buying new technology. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I want to see if anyone on the panel has anything in response to that or to any of the general themes we've been hearing on this first question about number one action.
Yeah, I think we're hearing a lot about the incentives and making sure that we have a stable source and that it's a long-term source of incentives. And along those lines, I appreciate that last comment about the like a state tax credit or some other way to recognize that we need to backfill that which is lost at the federal level. I will just note that in adopting the low carbon fuel standard regulation, the CARB board did direct staff to develop a medium and heavy duty vehicle clean fuel reward. And then we also have our heavy duty vehicle incentive program. And so we're looking at how those two can work together. So appreciate those comments.
Anyone else want to weigh in here? No pressure.
I heard many of the comments reference making things simpler, providing some more ease to, we have, I think many people have acknowledged, we have good programs. We want to make them stable and certain, and give them that kind of reliable ongoing funding. But we also want to make it easier for people, companies, entities to access them. So that was some of my takeaway from the comments that we've heard.
I hear volume, speed, streamlining, not leaving anyone behind, and that, these are all easy things to say, but when we dig into certain use cases, there is a lot of difficulties that we need to tease through for certain duty cycles and uses. So it's not going to be a one size fits all, but potentially building on the early successes that we have had, as others have mentioned with the 2B and 3. Why are we successful there and how can we build on that? But thank you for all of the thoughts on this first question.
All right. Let's go to question number 2. Big reveal here. All right. What types of programs, we'll get this up on the screen in a second here. What types of programs to meet air quality and climate targets would you like to see state agencies assess and possibly implement? So again, types of programs to meet air quality and climate targets that you'd like to see state agencies assess and possibly implement. Same process as with the first question. I think you can scan your way in, text your way in, or go on the website here. And just a quick time check. It's just about 2:45. We'll probably go for about another 15, 20 minutes here on this question. That may bring us to the natural conclusion of where people's thoughts are on this, given that there may be some overlap with the first question. But if not, we could take our break and then come back to this question before we get to the last two. And again, we have until 5 p.m. here. So I'll let folks start to respond. Hopefully everyone can access the question here. See if we're getting any responses in. All right. Already, you guys are fast typers. Of course, I gave you the questions in advance, so you might have had this already ready to paste. So innovative fees, use taxes for funding, indirect source rule on a port, trucks as a service business concept, congestion pricing. These are all programs for state agencies to potentially consider adopting, implementing. Another vote for indirect source rule, tax incentives and tax exemptions, looking at different mobility options like bicycle scooter share, cargo bike share, e-bikes. Did hear a bit about e-bikes in the first 2 meetings here last week. So working on new rulemaking, indirect source rules. More on vehicle incentives, infrastructure incentives, including infrastructure access, statewide indirect source rules, so a few votes for that already. All right, let's see. Anybody want to verbalize a comment here? Seeing some themes here on, again, on incentives, infrastructure. Yeah, all right, let's see. Hand in the white there. Gentleman in the white shirt. Yeah.
Hi, how's it going, everybody? Adam Mohabit here with the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. Thank you so much for being here. I guess just +1 on indirect source rules. Others in the room can probably speak to that a little bit better than me, but I think it's incredibly important. And I think we've been seeing a good example with South Coast AQMD. So we're thinking about that more and more. But, you know, on the infrastructure side, one factor the state and agencies just need to ensure and factor in is making sure that these funding cycles for the programs are just multi-year and predictable. Infrastructure deployment timelines from site selection to energization can take months to sometimes more than a year, meaning that infrastructure providers are planning out their networks just years in advance. So really, we all kind of need that collective predictability in order to make these right types of decisions. And also that includes how to really center equity into that conversation, right? So California should also really think about prioritizing investments where we know where we're going to get that strongest emissions reductions benefit. So one of the clearest cases here is really going to be on supporting both shared and private depots to support medium and heavy duty charging needs. I think while there's been a lot of political turbulence, you know, we need to remember that this is still a really young industry. So we need to A, bring forth funding, and B, really just maintain an openness to business models on that medium and heavy duty side, just given the nascency of that field. So lastly, I would just say we need to continue thinking about providing funding for operations and maintenance of public charging infrastructure, especially without dedicated maintenance support. Chargers obviously can fall into disrepair, really undermining consumer confidence and making it harder to rely on those networks, especially for folks who might not have access to charging at home. Reliable, well-maintained chargers are really essential to maintaining that high utilization and keeping costs down over time. So that's going to be pretty critical to underpinning that EV adoption momentum. You know, I think that's the primary thing for me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. If you want to pass it to the gentleman 2 rows in front of you, whose hand up.
Hi, James Tong again. Just dovetailing, well, first of all, I agree with the shared charging infrastructure. What we've seen that is a huge way to unlock adoption when fleets know that, hey, there's a place for them to charge. And we got to be careful to understand that shared charging is not necessarily the same thing as public charging. For fleets, they do want the certainty of having a charger available and making sure that actually the space actually fits their truck, which public charging typically don't address. The other piece I wanted to address was the point about making the entry level EV easier. And I know there's been a lot of talk about Class 2B and Class 3 is successful, and a lot of people take that as, hey, because they're successful, maybe we should subsidize them less. I think that would be an error to do that, in part because the adoption of EVs is still minimal, even at the Class 2 and Class 3 level. I would encourage actually to, because they're working, to even go deeper with that adoption, because what we're seeing is that these are the easiest entry points for not just a single fleet, but a multitude of fleets. And when a multitude of fleets adopt, say, 1 or 2 vehicle, it drives further adoption. So you get a cascading effect with Class 2 and Class 3 vehicles. I think the important part of that, too, is that it's relatively inexpensive. You don't need to subsidize a lot for a Class 2B, Class 3 vehicle. On top of that, the charging requirement is typically a level 2 charger, which is a lower entry point. Again, I emphasize the point, entry point. So I would encourage that. I think related to that, I think other people have mentioned this, is the inability to try before you buy. I know there are programs out there that allows for rental, but keep in mind those programs are very hard to access because you have to do a lot of paperwork, figure out your charging, and it's just too overwhelming for any business, even a large business, to do that just for simply one vehicle. I mean, not just say that this is the ideal way, but it's almost better just to give them a vehicle for a year and let them try it out and take it back, because then they'll understand the value of EVs and then they'll adopt, rather than making them jump through a bunch of hoops just to try out the first vehicle. And by the time they get to the first hoop, they're like, forget it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask on that point. I think across the different weight classes, experience of an EV can really indicate the decision to move to some kind of a ZEV or experience with a ZEV. When we think about the try before you buy type scenarios, do you have suggestions on what might work? I mean, we have what is like trucking as a service, a kind of a model, or is that something you would think that the state would try to be involved with? Do you have thoughts on that?
I have actually plenty, probably more than that. I can share this in the comments, but I am a trucking as a service provider. So yes, I think that helps. I think one of the problems is that even as a trucking service provider, jumping through the hoops on the behalf of the customer is really hard. The other piece of that too, if the customer really wants one vehicle and one charger to start, right, it's really hard just to do all the paperwork for that one vehicle, one charger. So you're incentivized to go after a larger fleet that says, hey, I'm going to take 10 vehicles, because if I'm going to invest all that upfront work, I'd rather do 10 vehicles than just one vehicle. So if there's an easier way to make it like a simple rebate per charger, per vehicle, then I think you could have it. That's why I was kind of joking a little bit. Just make it free. It's a joke, obviously, but it gets the point.
Thank you.
Yeah, woman in the third row from the back. Yeah.
Hi there. My name is Erlyn Martinez with CalStart, and I kind of want to take this opportunity to respond to the first question, saying the number one thing the state can do is to support access to clean transportation technology and to continue funding equity programs, specifically under the Clean Mobility Investment umbrella that specifically targets underserved populations. And so under that Clean Mobility Investment umbrella exists the Clean Mobility Options Program, otherwise known as CMO. And that was designed around the belief that historically under-resourced communities in California should receive the highest sustained investments in safe, efficient, affordable, and clean transportation options that connect them to the places that they need to thrive. The shared mobility projects funded by this program often include on-demand shuttles, school buses, bike sharing, scooter sharing, carpooling, van pooling, and are even funding components. The components of their projects often include electric vehicle equipment and installation. So there's that infrastructure piece there. So these projects funded by this program are already working with over 1 million miles traveled across the state. And so that program alone, along with the several others under the mobility investment umbrella, they do exist and are supporting transportation needs in underserved communities. However, these programs are consistently receiving more applicants than they can accommodate. There is an opportunity to allocate additional funding to these initiatives, as many projects are prepared to move forward and would greatly benefit from investments. Essentially, we hope to see ongoing funding for programs like CMO. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we got hands in the back right there on the aisle.
Thanks. My name is Jay Parapali. I'm a legal fellow with Communities for a Better Environment. We represent environmental justice communities in Wilmington by the Port of LA and Southeast Los Angeles. Want to speak also to indirect source rules and the importance of meeting ozone reduction targets in a long-standing non-attainment region in a time when every federal program and there's state-level pushes to gut CEQA, to streamline, to permit and build. And we support building, but it's got to be done responsibly and not at the jeopardy of community health in places that have been taken advantage of and subjugated for far too long. So indirect source rules are super necessary. We've already seen them start to work at the South Coast AQMD level in the Inland Empire. And we can't have, to the extent that CARB has any say in it, port-wide exemptions like at the Port of Long Beach or the Port of LA to not have ISRs altogether is completely irresponsible and is going to drag us backwards. And we're not even get to ZEV conversion. We're just going to straight up make our air quality and climate targets even more unattainable. So we can forget electrification progress if we're not even also acknowledging that hydrogen build out is going to lead to the more combustion of hydrogen, NOx increases from hydrogen, even if CO2 and methane go down potentially. And so you got NOx plus ozone, or NOx plus the VOCs and just greater ozone overall, and the greater costs of health burdens on vulnerable populations in our already bloated healthcare expenditures in this country and in this state. And so we want to see as robust of a push for things like AB 914 and against SB 34 as expeditiously as possible for EJ communities and for all Californians. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, we got hand up there, the gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mitchell Bogner. I work for a company called Harbinger. We're an OEM of electric and plug-in hybrid medium-duty trucks. We're based in Garden Grove. Thank you for coming down our way. We're really appreciative of all the hard work on this. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that we've seen on our side, on the OEM side, but I'd like to think that these are a little bit useful, more broadly talking about adoption of ZEVs across the landscape. I'm going to highlight two main things. The first is, I think, seconding a couple of comments that we've had here about pilot programs. What we've seen in this space is that when we get vehicles onto people's real road routes for a short to medium amount of time, a few months or something like that, there is such a better turnover and a higher potential adoption of these types of vehicles. Things like ISEF, I think, were really good programs that were a very good place to start, but there were also a lot of complications that we felt led to difficulties in actually getting these vehicles in the hands of customers. As a startup company, we very much struggled to adhere to those rules and see ourselves as being a provider for ISEF in a way that would help us get vehicles into the hands of potential customers, especially those in disadvantaged communities and so on. The second thing I'll mention is just to acknowledge the broader ecosystem of ZEVs in this country, specifically upfitters and dealers. These add in a significant amount of additional timing, as well as additional cost and so on, that are faced by other people that are not the manufacturer and not the customer. So when we think about things like HVIP, there's a significant timing potentially the dealers might have to deal with around between when they buy the vehicle and then when they sell the vehicle, and then later when they get the voucher for an HVIP applicable vehicle. We'd recommend trying to appreciate that, as well as implementing opportunities for dealer financing or ways to help bridge the gap of that timing difference. We really appreciate your consideration on this, and I think this will help to get dealer adoption, which will then help both the maintenance side, the longevity side, and really build out the ecosystem of ZEVs, which is really important more than just getting vehicles on the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments from the panel here? Okay. All right, other hands. Yes, woman in there in the third row back.
Hi, Lisa McGee with Tom's Truck Center. This is a great topic. Aging and the vehicle miles traveled, I think we could reimagine what that incentive could be and created. Perhaps an incentive for X amount of miles, perhaps an incentive after X age. Also vocations incentivized. I'm thinking of the government work trucks. They've got this hard mandate. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm thinking about that vocation and the heavy duty tractors, since they do travel a large amount of miles. They're only diesel. It's a heavy secondary market that procures the trucks primarily versus a brand new ZEV. So maybe it's a monthly payment that subsidizes, right? I just think there's ways that we could get out of the current program that we've been doing for a decade and reimagine it. We've got out the door costs on these heavy duty trucks that are 23%. 23%. You can give me that truck for free. If it's $500,000, I still owe $150,000. You know, that's 2 used heavy duty trucks. We've got to find a way to fix that problem. Uptime performance. OEMs, maybe they should be incentivized for the uptime performance and some type of standards requirement, making them reliable and responsible to their products. And the OEMs are facing very, very, very low volume right now. If we really dig into the numbers by class and by OEM, we have a low amount of volume. I don't know how we're going to get past creating a business case for an MSRP cap, but the volumes are too low to create a business case for these OEMs to survive. And the last one I have is a turnkey, something similar to what we did in the very, very first year for ISA program. It sold out. There was no cap on, and there was no requirement on how you use that funding. Today, there's still a cap of 90% of the truck price. They had 100% in 2022 when it launched, with no requirement on how you packaged it with a partner. I think we need more partners to create the turnkey solutions. Without the fuel, the truck doesn't do me any good. Without insurance, doesn't do me any good. Without financing, so I feel like we need partners that could be incentivized in a program. Hub sharing with small neighborhood fleets. A fleet partner with a truck might be the fuel partner. An insurance partner with the truck, or a finance partner with the truck. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other comments in response to this? Oh, yeah,
I had a
sorry.
question. You said, give you the truck free, you still have to pay the $150K. What's the $150K?
23% of the value of the truck price. 12% is the federal excise tax, 10% average sales tax, and 1% DMV fees.
Average sales taxes you just listed as what?
If your truck price for a heavy duty ZEV is $500,000, you'd add 23% of that with the 10%, 12%, and 1%.
23%.
Okay. And that doesn't include insurance or financing yet.
Right. Okay.
All right, thank you. Yeah, other comments? Yeah, right in front.
Yeah, thanks, Sam Wilson from Union of Concerned Scientists again. We've heard a lot about ideas to expand incentives and financial support, and I think UCS generally agrees with that. A lot of the times I think we get used to other states looking to us for examples here in California, but I would encourage the state to take a look at Colorado's clean delivery fee. I believe that's what it's called. It's a de minimis fee, 29 cents per e-commerce last mile delivery that raised nearly $80 million for the state in its first year of implementation. And that $80 million actually only amounts to about 0.5% of the total e-commerce sales for that state in a year. So a very, very crude estimate, but if we were to apply that same stat to California, which has nearly 7 times the e-commerce deliveries, we would be looking at around $450 million in additional revenue for incentives. Just for comparison, that's about 3 times of what is the proposed HVIP allocation for fiscal year 25-26. So, understanding some political barriers there potentially, but it's a decent chunk of change and would encourage the state to assess that potential. Thank you.
All right, let's take maybe one more question and then we'll break. I see some hands up. Let's see the gentleman in the blue shirt, and then we'll give you a chance after the break to ask your question.
Hi, my name is Felix Wang, and I'm with California Environmental Voters. And I would like to show support for the suggested port indirect source rule, as was put in many of the comments. If CARB could lend their support to indirect source rules locally and across the state, that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much for being here today and listening to us and our comments. And I was really happy to hear about fighting back against what we're seeing federally. And I think it's very important for the state to do what it can to fight against these federal attacks on our environment and double down on our commitments and show that we still care about our climate and our air quality and the people here. ISRs have a proven track record to spur clean transportation projects, and I think they would be a key tool to help us meet the legal obligations under the Clean Air Act. I think we need clear emissions reductions targets with enforcement, and a voluntary agreement won't do enough to reduce our emissions. We've been trying for several years now to get voluntary agreements and MOUs, memorandums of understanding, about port emissions, but nothing has been done on this front. So we would like to support a port indirect source rule with clear emissions reductions targets. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Synchronized with the written comments because a few came in with the same point. Before we just take a pause on this to take a break, just want to see if panelists have any interim thoughts here or responses on this question.
Well, on the topic of ISR, I appreciate that's come up in the written comments and in the room. And as was mentioned earlier, there is state legislation that it's AB 914 that the legislature will be considering. I believe that's a 2-year bill, so it won't be heard this year, but it is an ongoing discussion with the state. So I appreciate the support for that.
All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break, which means we'll reconvene at 3:22 p.m. California time. So enjoy your break. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And just a minute here, we gave you a little bit of extra time. All right, we're going to go ahead and try. Here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started. Gave everyone a little bit of extra time. I know we said we would. You hear me okay?
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute here. Gave you a little bit of extra time. But if you could please wrap up your conversations and get back to your seats. Ethan will lead us through the rest of the discussion here in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Can folks hear me okay out there?
The audio's not really up. Volume's up.
Here. Hopefully folks can hear out there. We're going to go ahead and get started again. I know I said we would reconvene at 3:22, so we gave everybody a bonus 8 minutes. So I hope you put those to good use. All right, so we are going to pick up where we left off in this terms of the second question: what types of programs to meet air quality and climate targets would you like to see state agencies assess and possibly implement? We got a whole lot of written comments here related to revamping tax credits, tax advantages, fees, congestion pricing, thinking of other types of incentive programs such as zero emission zones, enhancing loan program, improving air monitoring, rate reform, indirect source rule came up a number of occasions, looking at procurement policies for the state and reforming incentives. So these were just some of the sort of big picture types of solutions that folks mentioned, both in writing and verbally. We'll continue to take some comment on this question if people still have questions. We've got a couple more questions to go through, and we also are in the midst of swapping in a new panelist here. So I do want to thank Gia Vason for her representation on behalf of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, but we now have GoBiz's Director, Dee Myers, fresh in from the parking garage and hustled in, so we appreciate it, you joining, Director Myers.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and I'm delighted to be here. Sorry I wasn't able to join you for the first half of this, and I have gotten some fill. It was a robust and ranging discussion, and I look forward to more. I think, you know, again, this is a fruitful dialogue and very important. And for the second half of today's meeting, I mean, I know we're going to focus on some port-related issues, but I'm sure the conversation will be wide-ranging as it's been throughout this process and should be. So, you know, I think we just quickly, in order for the zero-emission vehicles transition to be successful, we have to have sufficient and reliable EV charging and hydrogen fueling stations located in the right places to enable people to get what they need and go where they need to go. And this means making it easier to permit and develop infrastructure, something that we've been working on, and certainly Commissioner Skinner and I talk about all the time. It also means working with industry and utilities and communities to identify the right investments so we can capture the benefits of and make sure that we help to continue to spur the growth of the broader market. And of course, ports play a huge role in all of these. So very important to be here today. We all know the scope of the economic driver that our ports here, particularly at the San Pedro complex, a huge driver, not just of our Southern California economy and not just of California's economy, but of course of our nation's economy. So the opportunity for the ports to play a role in demonstrating the value and efficacy and economic advantages of driving the transition, I think, is enormous. So with that, we look forward to hearing more from you about how, you know, obviously given the conversations that are happening in Washington these days, the governor thought it important to issue the executive order that brought us together today to make sure that we're still driving forward with clarity and focus and input from all of you. So again, delighted to be here, and thank you all for being here with us as well, and I look forward to your comments.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Director Myers. Glad to have you up here with us. So we did sort of pause our answers in response to this second question. I don't know if people still have comments. Just as a reminder, we are going until 5 p.m. We have a couple more questions to get to, but I just want to give it sort of one last chance. Oh, yeah, that's right. We did have a gentleman there. Thank you for you weren't keeping your hand up the whole break, but metaphorically you were, so thank you.
Ooh, your arm must be tired.
All right, so we'll get you a microphone here.
Thank you so much. Chris Chavez, Coalition for Clean Air again. In regards to this question, do want to echo the support for the local and statewide indirect source rules that others have mentioned. I won't dive into that much since there's been a lot of conversation on that already, but just wanted to say we've been part of that effort locally and want to continue supporting that. One thing I do want to expand more upon, though, is the AB 617 program. I'm a member of the Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach AB 617 Community Steering Committee. And as we know, that program was also part of the cap and trade reauthorization back in 2017. And this program is really the key way that communities have an opportunity to interface directly with the air districts and the California Air Resources Board to be able to advocate for their communities and really identify some of the local challenges. A lot of our air pollution is monitored at the regional level, but this looks at what the local neighborhood level challenges are in those communities. So continuing to support that program, but also looking for opportunities to expand it. There are some very polluted communities, communities that have long experienced discrimination, whether it was from redlining back in the 1930s to continued inappropriate land use decisions, continued impacts from goods movement. A lot of the concerns through that AB 617 process are tied to goods movement. And it's not just an incentive program, but it's also a regulatory program, because AB 617 helped guide the development of things like the warehouse indirect source rule at South Coast Air Quality Management District, which has been is already starting to reduce pollution in the communities that are most impacted by warehouses. So just really want to make sure that we are uplifting and supporting the AB 617 program, looking for opportunities to expand it and to strengthen it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that.
Other comments on this question before we move on to the third question? Yeah, hand up there on the aisle.
Yeah, thank you. Roman Partia Lopez with the Green Lending Institute. Yeah, I'll double click on the indirect source rule and then also just on the AB 617 funding and really working through those programs to, I think, really answer this question, right? Meet our air quality and climate targets that we've set for the state. Those programs and those communities that have come together to advance AB 617, right, have developed that community emission reduction plan that outlines solutions, right, to the air quality concerns and challenges that exist in their community. So I think that's one path I think that we need to explore further. In line with that, though, we know that there isn't enough funding for those programs, right? And so how do we ensure that we are then, with the other state resources that we have, whether it's through the Air Resources Board, Energy Commission, CalSTA, who also have electrification dollars, we're really being intentional about going in and like deep into those communities and really like implementing a lot of those programs that they're asking to be implemented, or funding the programs that they're asking, so that we really do make that impact that we're looking for when it comes to not just the transition to zero emission vehicles, but to air quality. I think it's really important for us to think about, and in a way also really help kind of combat this like narrative, right, that ZEVs aren't possible or that they're not for our communities, really by demonstrating that we can, or the state is really focusing in on those communities and ensuring that we are making that progress. I think really helps kind of shift the narrative that you all are committed to zero emission vehicles and, or I'm sorry, zero emission technology, and that it is something that lower income folks can access. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, hand up there, blue shirt.
Funding or implementation, or both?
Whichever you think is a bigger priority.
Okay, a little bit. Funding. Let's kill sales tax and let's up property tax 2.1. It would evolve Proposition 13. We can ask 15, 20, target 24 Hyatt hotels, settle at 14. We can go to Marriott, ask for 15, settle at 11, and then do a $600 or $800 parcel tax, flat rate. I've got the CEO of IQ Air in my phone, so we can do a speedy retrofit of Long Beach transportation for their, they would have to build it from scratch. That would be a new bid. And then offer on stimulus or some kind of forgivable loan program to small businesses, as Long Beach is a heavy small beach city, small business city, to give them IQ Air's air filtration. Yeah, that's both.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, hand up there.
Thank you, Fernando from PSETCH again. Just wanted to mention
a financial tool that could be very useful to keep pushing the momentum and really advance the energy transition will be the cargo fees, explore even a statewide cargo fee of all the ports that funding directly for funding zero emission infrastructure, specifically electric charging stations, for example.
Great. All right, thank you. Let's do maybe one more comment if there are any further hands up on this one, and then we'll wrap on this one and go to the third. All right, not seeing. Oh, there's a hand in the back there, sure, right there.
Good afternoon, Darrell Little Jr., State Policy Director on behalf of CalSTART. I'll be brief. I just wanted +1 to statewide indirect source rule. In addition to that, we'd like to see the implementation of zero emission delivery zones, which incentivizes the use of ZEVs for last mile deliveries to cut down neighborhood air pollution and support climate goals. In addition to that, we would like to see increased allocation of funding from this TSEP program to ZEV infrastructure. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So, as I mentioned, we've heard a lot of different ideas here, some of which overlapped with the first question responses. Just want to see if anyone on the panel wants to reflect on any comment that they've heard or the general themes here. Director Myers, we'll give you a pass since you missed the first 80% of this discussion.
Well, we talked a lot about ISR already. I did hear quite a bit about various sources of funding and the need for sustainable funding, in particular, kind of the ups and downs that affect fleets and planning is something that's really important. So that's certainly something that we'll be capturing.
Something that wasn't mentioned verbally, but I saw scrolling down the screen and wanted to highlight is, and I know it's not the focus of today, but something that we're always thinking about at CalSTA is how we can boost our public transit systems. Somebody had a comment on more convenient public transportation and bike lanes. So we understand that zero emission vehicles are a helpful tool, but also really changing the way that people travel, making public transportation more accessible. Reducing barriers to accessing public transportation is also really important. And so we currently have an initiative underway, the Transit Transformation Task Force, that's gathering input from all the various transit agencies and users and local governments to inform recommendations and decisions for how to make a better public transit system. So thank you for those comments as well.
All right. With that, we will wrap on this question. Again, this actually will stay open, so if folks want to continue to submit written comments, you're welcome to. And as I mentioned at the outset, there is the ZEV Forward page of the Resources Board to submit any further written comments. But let's go now to the third question of the day. What incentive programs, other than financial support, could encourage more adoption of zero-emission vehicles and related equipment? And we have already heard in the answers to the first two questions a number of responses to this question already, so we may be able to go through this somewhat quickly, but we just want to make sure we're giving an opportunity for people to respond to this question specifically about incentive programs other than financial support that could encourage more adoption of zero-emission vehicles and related equipment. We'll give folks a little bit of time to use their phones here. I think everyone's proven, or most of you have proven, that you're good at answering these and understanding the technology, so we'll let you fill that out. And then we'll see the responses as they trickle in. But again, what incentive programs, other than financial support, could encourage more adoption of zero-emission vehicles and equipment? All right, responses already trickling in here. So directly installing chargers through local utilities. We've got the indirect source rule once again. And as I said, we did hear a number of non-financial incentive ideas earlier, so if people want to put those back up there, that's fine. Or if there are other ideas that have not yet been captured, this is your chance. Not your only chance, but this is a chance. Try before you buy. Aligning hydrogen infrastructure investment with carb self-sufficiency study, more multilingual outreach, more efficient project permitting and energization, operation and maintenance support for hydrogen fueling infrastructure, increased EV charging availability in lower income areas, working with the automakers to advance clean cars to environmental justice provisions, local permitting, zero emission delivery zones. All right, anybody want to just comment verbally in response to this question? So let's see. Yeah, the gentleman there, the white sweater there.
Thank you. Sorry again, Fernando. And just want to double down on what several of my colleagues said. Port ISR. We need a port ISR. We need it now more than ever. And it's not just a thing of. I invite you to see it not in the sense of we need to achieve the climate goals and emissions goal, which is important, but to see it in the real sense of how it affects people. The further a port ISR is delayed, more people will get asthma, cancer, lung disease, cardiovascular disease, several other diseases, and more people will die prematurely. That could be totally preventable with strong emissions reductions. And I'm just looking right now of a very methodologically sound study and system called Climate Trace that was just released. And of all the LA urban area, which includes the LA County, Orange County, San Bernardino, and part of Riverside counties, over 51% of all the CO2 equivalent emissions are done by transportation. And we know, because of the data that we gather for the truck study we did in PSEDG, that most of these sources in transportation are heavy-duty trucks. And all the heavy-duty trucks that move goods from the ports go into the Inland Empire because we are the biggest logistical complex in the US. So that's why we need a port ISR and also a statewide ISR. Besides just trying to fight pollutants and people that want profit over the people in each air quality management district, we should work to have a statewide to really save lives. Let's understand that this is not just about achieving reductions goals for the state. It's about saving lives and protecting the health of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, question actually in the front row here. Move our way back.
My name is Peter Tawil from Rise On Truck USA, which is a medium duty manufacturer owned by Daimler. And I feel like we're doing a lot talking about some of the bigger trucks here at the port. My background, I've sold class 3 through 8, BEV and fuel cell EV. And I think as representing a medium duty, we can do a lot of things too. And I noticed that you're saying without money, what could we do? When I first started in this industry, it was all about the money. It was all about the incentives. And it's funny, Lisa's speaking over Tom's Truck Center. I worked for a startup at the time, and we sold through Tom's Truck Center, and people were buying because the incentive was good. And let me be clear: class 3 through 6 do pollute diesel for sure, but it's an easier sell. And this is coming from somebody who did 2 years at class 8 fuel cell. That's tough. And so they will buy if the incentive is here. The non-monetary incentives, not so much. But if you continue with, let's say, with HVIP, they will buy, and eventually Class 8 will follow. Class 8's tough. Listen, everybody knows I'm pretty damn green. Everybody knows which direction I swing politically. I believe in what we do. I built my own electric truck, for God's sake, from a diesel. So I believe what we're doing, but it has to go up the line versus down. And my suggestion, which would have been probably more proper to say in the first segment, but there were a lot of people speaking, and I want to follow up with what Lisa was saying. An advisory group. We can tell you everything. We have so much experience. Jeremy was speaking from EV Choice. We have lots of scars. We're in it to win it. You know, we're green. We care about it. I have a lot of friends who have lost their jobs in this industry. It shrank in the last year. So utilize us. Put us into an advisory board. And I'm serious. And I don't want to put Steve on the spot, but Steve, you have a board of directors that meets once a month. I could put a group together tomorrow, including Lisa and her group, and Chris Brown just spoke over at Harbinger. I could put a group tomorrow, and it can include OEMs, dealerships, charging networks, and whatever. And I will give you an example, and I apologize for hogging the space here, but I'm very passionate about what I do. And I know some of you people know who I am, just from my activism as well. We are working with SCAG and AQMD on a Class 4 or 5 program right now. And I got contacted 2 or 3 months ago because of my activism. And I know everybody who does commercial EVs. And they said, we want your input before we go down this road. So what we did is we were meeting monthly with them to tell real world stories. And we had a meeting this last Tuesday at EV Choice, and we had 4 OEMs. Remember, these are my competitors too, by the way. 4 dealerships represented, and we had 3 charging sites. And I called them all, made sure, so you have input. And by the way, we had dealer reps there too. And those dealer reps are the front line. When I say I'm a front line, I've sold one of these trucks or many of these trucks, but the reps are the ones that sell it. They're going to give you really good information. So although we all have good information here, we need it to be more in depth and tell you what the rubber is actually hitting the road. Yeah. So I firmly believe, and I ask of you, to allow us to have that voice. I know the big guys get the voices, but the frontline people, they don't. And there's a lot of people that are no longer excited to be selling EVs anymore. Yeah. So I don't know what I have to do at the end of this call, this whatever. Let's do this. I'm a very roll up our sleeves and let's do this. We're doing it with SCAG and AQMD. It's working. Now, are we getting everything we want? No, but at least they're hearing us. And it's going to make the program better. Now, for all those, my neighbors here who want cleaner air and equity, if we do our job successfully, you guys all win. We all win. But if it's difficult for us to be successful, we're that front line, then none of this does really matter.
Well,
and so
appreciate the opportunity or invitation to participate in an advisory, informal advisory group. Just want to see if anyone here on the panel has any thoughts in response on the outreach question.
Well, I know you've been working with staff and you've had a lot of contact with the board. So yeah, we appreciate that engagement. Thank you.
No, but I'm saying as sitting around with Frontline, and they can tell you their perspective of what's happening.
All right, appreciate it. Yeah, apologies, just I know we've got a few other hands up too, so I'll make sure we can get everyone's comments in here. I did see a gentleman there in the blue shirt. Yeah. There.
Super, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for being here, and it's pretty wonderful to see so many people practicing democracy and you all listening. Just kind of a little different take, and that is CARB has a very compelling story to tell, and I wish CARB would tell it. The narrative of, and it's just not just CARB, it's CalSTART, it's AQMD. We got a wonderful narrative, but we are a very wonky bunch, right? So we could really help our elected officials. We could really help each other if we can get this narrative out there of what we've done. I was born in Whittier in the 1960s, educated in Los Angeles, Head Start, K-12. I remember smog days. I remember closing the schools. We don't have that anymore. And that's thanks to the work of people in this room and what you do. But the story and the narrative sometimes gets lost because we are just, vouchers, taxes, that sort of thing. So when I talk about a narrative, a good example would be Long Beach Container Terminal, where automation, decarbonization, transportation, electrification all come together. And a great storyline, how many jobs does that create? When they use a cargo handling equipment like an Orange EV, I think they're manufactured in Kansas. How many jobs does that create? CARB is helping to drive innovation, onshoring of American jobs. It's doing a lot of things, but I think it gets lost in the general public. And if you look at the AQMD website, CalSTART website, CARB website, you just don't see it. You don't see that beautiful story of what you've done, and it would be helpful. And you can take that from Long Beach Container Terminal to Orange EV to a Watt EV or Forum Mobility, what they're doing out there, their Volvo electric trucks, manufactured in the United States. How many jobs is that? Taking it to Prologis in logistics centers in the Inland Empire. How many jobs is that? I think what's 14 megawatts of solar energy they put together. So, and then Harbinger. Somebody here was from Harbinger or Tom's Trucks. Those are American jobs. It's American innovation. So that's what I would really like to see. It's just more of the story because you're already doing great work. And I'll close by saying this is, I live in a city coastal city about 15 miles south of here. It got its name from electrification of transportation. That city is Huntington Beach. It used to be called Pacific City. And when Henry Huntington came along with his electric rail, they said, well, yeah, we'll bring the rail down here. I'll do it for you if you name the city after me. And there you go. So Huntington Beach was originally Pacific City. Now it's Huntington Beach. And you can still see some of the electric rail lines there on the beach. Then they discovered oil and we got off track. So tell the story of what you guys do. That's what I'm here to say. You're doing wonderful work. The people in this room are doing wonderful work. But get the story out there, make it easier for the politicians and the policymakers. And we are the 4th largest economy in the world. Don't worry too much about Washington, D.C. for now. That's it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the historical shout out, the original electric vehicle, one of those electric trains. Any thoughts here from the panel? Telling the story, the outreach?
Yeah, I just say +1 to your comments. We need to tell the story better about the benefits. It's not just to the EV drivers, right, who get to feel virtuous, but obviously to the communities, but the jobs that roll and what we're seeing in public sector polling across the country is that when we talk about jobs created and the benefits of ownership and the cost of ownership and all the things, in addition to what we know are the climate benefits, that really drives an uptake of approval and interest in owning and driving an electric vehicle. So, obviously that's on a passenger level, and of course the benefits are sort of exponentially greater as you get into heavy duty. So, thank you.
All right, there was a hand up. Yeah, there you go, in the black shirt.
Jeremy, EV Choice again. Just a quick suggestion for the incentive program without financial support. You guys have a sustainablefleets.org, I believe it is, where you kind of grade fleets who bring ZEVs in. They get like a platinum, gold, or a silver status. And then I feel like the state agencies or public agencies should be giving preference to those companies who have adopted ZEVs. So basically, if a trash fleet has 20% of their vehicles ZEV, they should get preference on the contract for those city contracts, would be one suggestion. And then the other, trying to get diesels off the road would just be like a diesels for cash program, where you just basically give a credit for diesels just to get scrapped in general.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that echoes actually some of the comments we heard, I think, in Fresno around using the power of recognition for those moving forward. Other comments on this question? Yeah, gentleman with the blue T-shirt.
Going into the 3.7 for fiscal year 26 or current? We should probably talk about going for the.
Yeah, the 3.7.
There's a proposed budget for Long Beach of 3.7 billion for fiscal year 2026.
Okay. Well, the scope of this is state policy, so if there's an example from Long Beach you can bring up, that would be helpful. But ideally, we're looking for state incentives or local incentives that the state could potentially help encourage.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, sorry, big guy. That might have been.
So happy to come back to you.
Okay.
Why don't we come back to you? And then right in front of you.
No, it's okay. So no non-zero sold by the end of this fiscal year would be great. We could do a radical downsizing of our fueling stations across the state. And then parking costs exclusive for fossil fuel vehicles and waive state parking for EVs.
All right, thank you. Actually, if you mind passing that microphone right to the right front, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa McGee with Tom Struck Center. I really appreciate everyone's topic today on this subject. A lot of wonderful work that we've done, and HFIP has been really the leader. I look back at the topic of Tell the Story. I was a fleet operator in 2015 trying to keep airport trucks on the road with AC charging. They traveled 2 to 3 shifts a day. So, and then went on to an OEM, and now I'm with a dealer. So there are a lot of stories to tell. I'm a strong applicant for this technology. And the reason is because I was on the ground living it. Day after day, we had drivetrain issues, we've had OEM issues, we've had charging issues, right? So until you can see the story on the operational side, you can't believe what you actually achieve in terms of benefits. You cannot see it when you're not on the ground because there's too many obstacles with what we know about the technology. So you have to change your behavior to support what the technology requires in order to use it. So I really think that we need some type of early adopter benefit with a turnkey solution. And that would be that try before you buy program with a commercial discount in X period of time. The try before you buy program would be a round table. So it would go from city to city or from industry to industry. For example, if we had vocations that included government and tractors, all of us would come together. The drivers, the OEM, the market would be developed by all the vendors that could create that solution and be the benefactors of the program.
All right, great. Thank you. Any thoughts here in response? In general? Okay, yeah. Any last comments here? Yeah, gentleman with the sport coat there. Thanks to our roving microphone.
Thank you. Ian McMillan, I'm with South Coast AQMD, and my boss left, so I can really speak my mind now. I kid, he's probably listening. So I wanted to bring up, and you're taking notes, got it. Wanted to bring up a few thoughts on infrastructure. We've heard a few things about it, but just a couple other thoughts. I think as we've seen this transition to date on zero emissions, we're discovering more and more the key holdup is less on the technology on the vehicle and more on how do we get the infrastructure in place. That's really a challenge because it's site by site and all the difficulties that I think we all know about. So, I think 3 main things I just wanted to raise up here. One is on the infrastructure, there's also just the rates themselves. Like one of the things that we're seeing is increasing, cost of electricity and understandably wildfire risk mitigation and a lot of other things that go into that. But that just is further discouragement because the total cost of ownership is harder to recoup on the back end. So just thinking what can be done on rates. And, we have a current structure of our electrical grid that wasn't really thinking about transportation. It was thinking about buildings and land use, and it was built a certain way. And so it affects how we do both the rate structures, but then it also affects how we do the permitting, right? Because you don't build a city block in, 6 months. It takes a very long time. And so the idea is that permitting can take a long time for utilities, but that doesn't work if you buy a truck and it's delivered in 6 months and it's now a paperweight because you can't get the charging infrastructure in place. So I know there's a lot of work already happening at the state, a lot of really good work in this space. And I think that needs to continue to try to optimize that permitting, both whatever needs to be happening at the state level and then also at the local level. There's probably going to be a point at which that you can optimize it so much, but it just takes time. And so I think the third point I wanted to raise was also, are there bridging technologies that should be pursued on the infrastructure side? And so we've demonstrated a few of these down here at South Coast, where, if it just takes time to get the utility power to a site, can you do things like fuel cells on site or portable power generation that can be put on site, linear generators, whatever it is, that you can do very low to no emissions on site temporarily until utilities can come in. Right now, how all of these are working is it's very bespoke, it's very custom to every site, but that doesn't, we need to think about scale. right? And to scale, there needs to be very simple solutions. And so is this something that state programs do to sort of standardize? Do utilities get involved in this? And so there's a standardization, so it's easier to do this site to site to allow this timing to get addressed a little bit better. So just some thoughts there on that. And I think the other one is also thinking about, there's the investor-owned utilities, and right, PUC has a very clear role with investor-owned utilities, but when it comes to the publicly owned utilities, there's a lot of those, right? We heard DWP speaking here earlier. We have Riverside, Colton, Pasadena, Glendale, et cetera, down in our region. And they're each have their own setup, their own programs, but there's real opportunity for innovation. And is that something that, you know, is there a way to engage with the publicly owned utilities, because they have, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes they can be more nimble, sometimes not. They have different things they have to think about. But is there ways to use that, these smaller utilities to try to find ways to innovate to get the infrastructure in place faster, that you can't quite do it the same way on the investor-owned utilities, that we still need that too. And then I'll just mention it here, thinking about other incentives outside of infrastructure. One of the things that I'll just say from personal experience, one of the number one incentives I used when I first got a zero emissions vehicle, and actually this is back when I got a natural gas Honda Civic back a while ago, HOV lane stickers. Non-monetary, hugely important in California when time is so precious. I don't, understanding that that federal program is going away, but the idea, are there other kinds of non-monetary incentives that can make, I think, we've heard a lot about the cost, and cost is important, but how do you make a product better? And that's the other side of this, right? And you think about when technology has come in very quickly, cell phones. Cell phones are not cheaper than wall phones. That's okay, they're better. Microwaves are not necessarily cheaper than having just a stove, but they're better for what they do. And so how do you make a product better? An HOV lane sticker helped make that product better. So are there other ways to make products better? It's easier said than done, but just put it out there. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Let's see, maybe do one last comment here. Yeah, woman right there. And we'll summarize.
Hi, Andrea with People's Collective. Yeah, one non-financial incentive, I guess, to try to spur more infrastructure and EV deployment, I think, is to look at what rules we have already on the table that have those moving levers that could make it more likely to do it. So for example, indirect source rules have been talked about a lot, but I really want to talk about the warehouse indirect source rule at South Coast, because I think it was made for kind of a moment like this. I mean, all of it to build compliance, to build compliance faster or whatever it might be, you have to do more actions. And some of those actions could be bringing in electric vehicles, putting more charging, having more storage. And so all of that was left to be like tuned on how strict those things could be, or how much compliance points you need to meet each year. And so thinking about that, I think in the South Coast, where there is a huge need for EVs, thinking about looking at tools like that, where we could maybe adjust them to make it, you know, make it more of an incentive to bring in EVs. I think that's one of the tools we have. And I'll just double down on some of the points that people have said about a roundtable with like industry experts. I think that is a really good idea. If you guys are also doing it with community groups, then I think it'd be great to bring folks together on that.
Right, great, thank you. Well, let's summarize here. Not the end of the feedback on this question. People can still continue to submit written comments here in response to this question or just in general. But I just want to turn to the panel now and see if there's sort of summarizing thoughts here, thinking about the themes we've heard. I know Commissioner Skinner, you wanted to jump in with some thoughts.
It's not so much a summarization of the thoughts, but I was curious, and maybe people think of this as a financial incentive, but I was curious that there wasn't any suggestion for, and this is, I suppose, more beneficial to light-duty EVs, but to returning of the HOV sticker, giving ZEVs access again to HOV lanes, and or free access to now what is more common, these express lanes that have a toll associated. So just interested in reactions to that.
Yeah, if folks want to weigh in on that question, we did hear some comments along those lines, but I see, let's see, a hand in the back was, folks can just keep it relatively brief so we can make sure we got time for our fourth question, but please go ahead.
Hi, David Park with the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. The 710 corridor, and a Long Beach resident, the 710 corridor was a improvement project, was a major effort by Metro. It has moved forward in several iterations. Back in the day, they talked about, electric vehicle only lanes on 710 corridor. I think that that would be an amazing improvement. So there are major truck corridors coming out of the ports, 710 to the 10 to the 60, et cetera. Electric truck only lanes, that would be a home run.
All right. So we hand up over here in the, sir, do you have your hand up? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So, and thank you, Commissioner Skinner. On the light duty side, so Chris Chavez Coalition for Clean Air, couple of different thoughts. So there is, I think there are certainly opportunities for those non-monetary incentives, like you mentioned, HOV lane access, toll lane access. Toll lanes, there might be a little bit more local state control since those are managed by local transit districts and state, although there still is a federal overlap because it's a federal interstate. I'd have to defer to Caltrans and the other agencies on the specifics of how that would work, but that could be an option. But one thing I did want to highlight, and this is more on the monetary incentive side, one of the most important incentives programs as it relates to light duty ZEVs at the moment is the Clean Cars for All program, which is there's a district-based program as well as a new statewide program. The district-based programs, however, a lot of them have unfortunately run out of money at various points. I know this past year, the legislature in the state had to do kind of an emergency infusion of cash into the programs to allow the San Joaquin and Bay Area programs to continue operating. However, that money's not going to last forever. It was only a small amount. South Coast, I think, has a little bit more on hand and can last a bit longer. But a lot of our district-based Clean Cars for All programs have been struggling under the couple years of austerity that we've been, unfortunately dealing with because of the budget situation. So certainly I think the Clean Cars for All program is going to be very important and really focusing in on that equity aspect of it and getting that money, whether it's monetary incentives or non-monetary incentives to the communities that have the highest barrier to clean transportation. Because that is a big factor. I know a lot of folks have challenges also with like charging because they live in an apartment. I myself live in an apartment. It was difficult to find a solution where I could, have a zero emissions vehicle. Fortunately, I was able to figure that out. But with that said, I think that when we talk about light duty vehicle deployment, just having that equity aspect of it being part and parcel of the discussion.
Yeah, quick thoughts in response to the question around HOV access. So yes, woman there, fourth row back, and then we'll go to your aisle mate right up here, or whichever order. Okay.
It's Elisa McGee, Tom's Truck Center. Yeah, I thought that was a good suggestion that you brought up that we didn't comment on that. So the carpool, just for clarity, is only for the class 3 and under. So it'd be interesting to see what could happen, I guess, for opportunities for medium heavy duty. I'm not sure if that's reasonable, but I think the toll idea is an excellent idea to have an exemption for zero emission. Also an exemption for trip fees at ports. I know that there's some, but not all, it's not going in the hands of necessarily the stakeholders or the end users. Sometimes others are keeping the benefit. And maybe even something to do with parking access for ZEVs. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And if you want to pass it just to your right there, that'd be great.
Yeah, so James Tong, CEO of Mitra EV again. I like the idea, as an EV driver, I like the idea of a sticker. Now, if I put on my broader public policy hat right now, I think what public policy would like to do is trying to drive incremental adoption. So my concern there is if you give the sticker, it may not help incremental adoption, but rather help those like myself who already have adopted and learned the ways that EV is superior. I know this might be popular among the room, but my feeling is that if you did want to issue sticker, maybe it gets back to my previous point about entry level. Perhaps you offer it to the first time EV adopter. That will make it helpful. I also know too, because I'm local here, you know, having more EVs in these expressways can also create problems, create congestion of its own, which will defeat the purpose of reducing emissions. So I would be sparing on how we think about that. I think there are other non-monetary mechanisms. For example, just making chargers available. And one of the things, like for the fleet purposes, having more shared charging infrastructure, but not just having more shared charging infrastructure, make sure that different providers out there would allow for interoperability and roaming. We have shared charging infrastructure. We'd be happy to share with other people. We just don't know who's out there who's been willing to do that. So if the government, you know, if somebody come here, broker, hey, you guys should all work together, I'd be happy to. And I know this is a little controversial, but I've looked at the public charging market for light duty, and one of the disadvantages of doing, and when I look at the unit economics of public charging, you know, there are really strict rules on ADA requirements, and it's not to say that I'm not supportive of you know, so helping the less fortunate, but what's clear is that if you talk around the industry, a lot of people find that onerous and adds a lot of cost and may restrict the supply of public chargers, which, you know, may hurt the general good. So something to think about there.
No, thank you for that. I'm just going to turn back to the panel here, so in the interest of time, see if there's any summary thoughts here or responses to these comments.
Yeah, to the HOV conversation, and James, appreciate your comments and bringing up some of those nuances in, you know, our use of that tool and incentive. It's not exactly clear cut, and I will say that this is something that also relies on our federal partners because it's a federal authorization that allows states to allow EVs into into carpool lanes. So that is something, though, that last year Governor Newsom did sign into law, AB 2678. In the case that the federal government extends that authorization, that California will be able to follow. So we do have that mechanism in place if there's action from the federal government. But to your point, it is very nuanced in, you know, what are we incentivizing? Are we incentivizing that incremental adoption? Are we already awarding those who are there? As a transportation agency, there's definitely thoughts and feelings about the congestion and how we manage our lanes best. You know, if there's times, are there enough electric vehicles on the road to have that make sense and cramming everyone else in and creating, you know, it's really about traffic management. So appreciate just that it's very nuanced conversation.
Christine, I'm just curious about, yes, that is accurate about the HOV lanes. What about the express lanes?
Those I'm less familiar with, and I know if we think about some of the express lanes are then operated by locals, and so it's more individualized case by case. Like the toll roads of Orange County, for example, they might have something to say about us telling them what to do and allow on their roads. But the other HOT lanes under Caltrans control, I'm less familiar with that policy.
They would want us to replace the revenue, right? Which,
well, yes, on any they control, but anything on any toll lane that Caltrans put in on a state highway or even an interstate would not be under local control. Correct?
Yeah, it probably depends very closely on those projects and how they're financed, because the tolls are likely paying for that improvement over the long term. So again, it's money. The money has to balance out, but it is something definitely that we can look into. But
at least on those, it's state.
Yeah.
Other closing thoughts? All right. Well, thank you all for that discussion. We're going to go to our last formal written question here. This is not the end of the discussion unless we run out of time, but this is the last one for written submission specifically on this via this website. So what are some principles for zero emission vehicle program design that ensure we don't leave any Californians behind. So again, principles for program design to ensure we don't leave anyone behind. This really gets at the equity issues and concerns that a number of folks have brought up, both verbally and in writing. Let me make sure I got the instruction page going, so make that QR code a little bit bigger. I think people probably now at this point are familiar with how to respond here. So we'll give people a little time to respond, and then, and like with the other questions, we have covered some of these themes in the first and second set of responses, but want to make sure we have time to call this out specifically as a topic. All right, so price gouging, I assume that's getting back to the discussion we had around the cost of battery electric trucks. But folks can correct me on that if you mean something different. Meaningful environmental justice practice, community-driven and identified priorities, making sure dollars are spent in high-traffic disadvantaged communities, following dealer local rules and services. A note of opposition to SB 34. Ensuring that environmentally burdened communities are prioritized for investment. So a couple consistent thoughts there. Let's open it up on the microphone here. Yeah, there's a woman in the third or second row from the back.
Hi, please consider exemptions. My name is Ina. I'm a founder, together with my husband, of a company called Nilu 27. We make hypercars, combustion engine hypercars. We aim to build 50 cars a year, never more than that. And on average, our cars are driven 2,500 miles per year. We're not really part of the problem, but you are essentially kicking us out of the state and our customers. So Europe, for example, makes exemptions for ultra-low volume manufacturers such as ourselves to allow us to put the cars on the road. And I just want to bring this to your attention, urge you to consider that as well.
Thank you. If there's any responses on that? I know at least on the advanced clean trucks rule, there's an exemption for small manufacturers. May not be the case for the other rules. Let's see, a hand right there. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Roman with the Green Landing Institute. Yeah, just a couple points. First, quickly responding to this question, I think we've been talking about the need to really center equity and community voices in this process, right? So as you all continue to think through the proposals that you'll look to advance, really taking that and yeah, going back into community and seeing whether what you all have identified will really provide those direct and meaningful benefits to those communities that are most impacted by air pollution. So really developing some set of equity principles for you all to ensure that any proposal that you're looking to move forward, addresses those principles. I then also just wanted to go back really quickly to the HOV question, because I think it's an interesting one. But the HOV access has been around, I think, since the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project was implemented years ago. And then it continued, right? Even with the Clean Cars for All and Drive Clean Assistance programs were in place. So I think if that HOV access is going to continue, it should probably be really targeted to those that are probably just accessing EVs for the first time. Clean Cars for All and Drive Clean Assistance are now it has changed names, but those programs are generally allowed to be used once, and usually they're first-time buyers, right? So that could really be a continued benefit that you're providing if you are thinking of moving forward to HOV lane access for light duty. On the medium to heavy duty side, I think one thing that kind of came up for me is when thinking about the Trade Corridor Enhancements Program, right, and like the fact that that program is used, those funds are used for
highway expansions, right? Is there a way then that in that TCEP application process, there's more points or there's just more likely to get funded if those projects are proposing kind of a truck-only lane or something along those lines that really then create some type of a quote-unquote HOV access for zero-emission vehicles that are then going to be operating in that project area. And then lastly, the zero, when it comes to one of the previous comments I had was around the voluntary advanced clean cars to environmental justice provisions. I think that's another way too, as we think about how do we both try to incentivize, autos, right, to continue to engage in the projects that the state has developed and demonstrate their commitment. There are two provisions there around getting vehicles, new vehicles, 25% at a reduced 25% price into car share programs, and then the off-lease vehicles going into or having priority for the Clean Cars for All programs. Utilizing those as a way to negotiate and with autos and demonstrating their commitment to state goals by continuing to prioritize those EJ provisions that were originally mandatory but could potentially be moved into a more mandatory by the demonstrated commitment of those automakers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Right behind you, got a hand up.
Hi, this is Erla Martinez with CalSTAR. Just to kind of add to the conversation, yes, the Clean Cars for All incentives do allow for discounted ability to buy EV cars, but I just want to affordability overall is a major concern, but also I want to know that not everyone can buy a car, and it is very expensive to maintain a car, and we need to really think about thinking outside the box when it comes to clean transportation accessibility. I mentioned the CMO program, how that is making clean transportation options available in neighborhoods where residents have the highest need for affordable options. CMO can continue to provide access to resources and technical support. So many more communities can develop their own innovative mobility solutions, prioritizing cleaner, accessible, and more affordable transportations. To answer this particular question, how are some ways that, what are some principles for program design and that ensure that we don't leave any California behind? California needs to continue to take a holistic approach to helping communities invest in equitable, accessible, clean transportation options. Projects, like I mentioned in CMO, that are funded through CMO support can meet community transportation needs as seen and interpreted by those who live there, and ensuring they do exactly what was intended. From what we have been witnessing through the administration of CMO, it's important for community groups that represent our most vulnerable populations to have a seat at the table at all stages in the creation and ongoing implementation of the state's clean transportation program. Thank you.
Thank you. Hand up, a couple hands up in that, three hands up in that row. So that's our all-star row right now. Pass the microphone down the line.
James Tong again. I've been doing public-private partnerships for the better part of my life, even since I was graduated from college and working in the Peace Corps. And one thing I've seen in general is how we have solutions define our goals when the goals should be defining the solutions. What I mean by that, the goal is really about clean transportation, affordable, making it easy for people, cleaner air. One of the solutions is zero emission vehicles. It's not a solution for everybody, right? And I think we just heard that from the previous speaker. And I think one of the guiding principles is not to be so narrowly focused on trying to deploy EVs as opposed to let's make sure we have clean transportation for more people, right? period, right? And that could be EVs, that could be e-bikes, it could be other things, or it could be not needing to drive at all. So that's an important principle. I think the other principle too, I would argue, is that we know that going now my fleet electrification hat, the small and medium-sized businesses are 99% of fleet operators out there. There isn't an easy pathway. And yes, there are programs and incentives, but just to access those programs require a lot of work. So we need to make it more simpler. I know that was a speaking point echoed already. I think related to that too, it's also important to note that those fleets do often locate in disadvantaged communities, in part because of the way we zone things. You know, more industrial businesses are located in a certain area. They tend to be closer to lower income communities. So it's something to think about. So when we try to, I would encourage, I mean, you could solve the fleet electrification problem focusing on small fleets. You could solve a lot of the equity issues and solve for the goals of cleaner air, better traffic for the disadvantaged communities.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead and pass it along.
Hi, my name is Mark Sheldon. I'm an individual consultant primarily in the hydrogen area. I'm based in Huntington Beach, and and for background, I happen to drive a Mirai, so I'm going to talk a little bit on those issues. But I think a lot of what I say transfers over to battery electric infrastructure as well. It's easy to fall into a couple of assumptions. One is that zero emission vehicles are the province of the rich, right? Because they tend to be expensive. As someone pointed out in one of the earlier sessions, the used vehicle market is coming, and I personally bought my Mirai used with 30,000 miles on it 3 years ago, and I'm from the process of driving it till the wheels fall off, or the hydrogen isn't available anymore. But the station distribution, there's a couple of things there. One is that the station distribution originally was carefully targeted because of limited deployment to go into certain areas. And it was easy to be a little too clever about, there were reasons for the placement of the stations that we made, but as it grows, eventually you start to assume only people who live in these areas are going to want to buy. And if you're going to have a robust used market and to start to move to more general economic class availability, you've got to have the infrastructure distributed with fewer assumptions about where they're going to be, where they're going to live, where they're going to need to fuel or charge. So you need to think a little bit more expansively about where you place the infrastructure. I'll give one example that has sort of come up in my discussions with some of the people, AB 617 advocacy groups here in the port area, and that is that a lot of focus is on the port itself, which is right, and the drayage to and from the ports and the activity there at the ports. But there's a whole economy that's in the neighborhood around the ports, right? Transport around the ports, trucking around the ports. And those are the people that are crying for, please give us some relief from the vehicle emissions in our neighborhoods that are just outside the ports. And yes, they're affected by the ports themselves, but they're also affected by their own streets. And if you simply think of fueling infrastructure in terms of dots on a map, it's easy to say, oh, there's some dots over here. That means where Long Beach is covered. No, it means that the port of Long Beach is covered, not necessarily that the neighborhood around Long Beach or Wilmington or the South Bay is adequately covered. You need to think about what the network of actual traffic looks like, and what the trucking industry needs, and that is going to be more important as you move into farther into heavy duty trucking, which is going to be a major opportunity for scale up of technologies like hydrogen that are better amenable to long range heavy duty transportation. you know, also going to see this a little bit in terms of bus fleet deployment, although bus fleets tend to have their own fueling infrastructure. But that which is another opportunity to get zero emission transportation available to wider class of the population. So
All right.
please take these into account and try to allow for the future expansion
Yep.
of zero emissions into the population as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. If you don't mind passing the microphone, I believe they're right there. And if it, also, since we're getting close to the end here, I want to leave time for wrap-up comments. Just ask that any further comments here, just as succinct as possible. So please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mike Macias. I'm with TCI. I wanted to echo several others on the try before you buy. Currently, we participate that as a provider, and I've had good success on small fleets, but a huge portion of our customer base is medium and large fleets. And I would like to advocate towards maybe doing a program like that with a try before you buy for that medium size. That way we can definitely reach those customers that we can convert over like we did our small fleets. But in our customer base, that's a small portion versus the medium where we can really do a big impact as a rental and leasing. On top of that too, I know with the WARE incentive program that's coming out, hopefully with the INS program, we're included in that. A lot of our customers are in his area, and they don't run their own fleets. We either do dedicated and or rental leasing, full service and all that. But yeah, I just wanted to advocate for that.
Great, thank you. All right, and you can pass the microphone right in front of you, if you don't mind, gentleman in front.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Byron Washam. I'm the Director of Strategic Energy Initiatives at UC San Diego. I would like to offer my comments in a perspective of being the site host to over 500 level 2s and 13 DC fast chargers on our campus. During the past 12 years, we have served over 9.5 gigawatt hours of service to over 22,000 unique drivers from 1,200 zip codes. Needless to say, I'm an advocate of workplace charging. With respect to this fourth question, I am under the impression that having workplace charging available to those priority population residents is more valuable than having EV charging stations unattended in a public place in a priority population. So that, I think, plus the incentive with our permits, regardless of where you come from or your economic status, the preferred parking, the best parking on campus is available to every student, every employee, every faculty member, dean, and vice chancellor. You park right next to them. And that's an incentive in and of itself. While I have the floor, I'd just like to also reflect on the earlier questions. With respect to the question on what can we do, Dee Dee Meyer said it, we need to have a crisp and clarity-focused message. And right now, California is not doing that. And so we need to improve the message and burst it out. With respect to that, I would like to see a campaign of why not California? Question mark. If you look at the oversupply of capacity of EV charging, EV manufacturers in China and the prices that they are providing that and the quality of cars, I ask the question, why not California? Another example would be Norway at 84% ownership of EVs. Why not California? The CEC this morning announced 100,000 ZEVs in Q2 alone were registered in California, and which represented 21% of all the new registrations. For those people who have talked about early adopters, there are 5 cycles in that curve. We are now in the third cycle, and that is the early, excuse me, the early majority. And so we should fully embrace the fact that we are in the early majority of EV charging. Additionally, over the past 15 years at the university, we've been through 4 generations of charging stations. And the rate of innovation is absolutely incredible, not only in charging technology with adaptive load management that will be load following and charge at a time when the California Carbon Intensity Index is 0 or near 0, and the battery energy storage and the miles available. And finally, on that point, the shared use model of ownership. All of these 3 things are going to radically change how we perform and how we serve the public. And so for those people who are discouraged by the headlines every morning, I've been in this business, excuse me, for 50 years. This is merely my 4th speed bump, my 4th presidential speed bump. And so there's no better place to exert leadership than in a vacuum. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron, for that. We're almost out of time. I think that's a good note to see if there's any sort of closing thoughts here from the panel on this question of equity specifically, and then we'll try to leave a few minutes just for any sort of open comments. I know we are running out of time, but just on this equity question, we've got some great input here from the written comments too, but my panelists want to weigh in.
I just have one kind of note I'd like to just kind of add to the record. Somebody touched on it, which is how do we drive the creation of a used EV market? Because obviously that is an equity driver and something that we hear a lot about out on the hustings. So just noted.
Yeah.
I appreciate that often our partners in the advocacy for equity sometimes feel that the agencies are perhaps not as responsive, but I wanted to communicate that that not only are there statutory requirements on us, for example, for the CEC in terms of our when we do funding solicitations for the charging installation, in most cases we have a certain % requirement that we must show that equity issue in terms of showing the installations in our disadvantaged and or low income communities. So we have a variety of criteria like that we must follow, and we do closely follow that in all of our funding solicitations and awards.
I just wanted to note, I really appreciate the acknowledgement of some of the statewide programs that exist, like Clean Mobility Options, the Regional Clean Cars for All, the statewide program. We also talked about e-bike incentives earlier. I think those are all really critical programs that have delivered a lot of success to communities. The AB 617 program came up earlier as well. And I think there is a point now where we need to ensure that those programs have continued funding. That's also been acknowledged as part of this discussion. So I'm sure that's something that will be captured in the report as well.
I want to reiterate, as I said during my opening remarks, that one of CalSTA's core 4 priorities is equity, and we take that very seriously. So appreciate all of the comments here today. And we know historically that transportation has caused a lot of harms in communities. And so everything that we do today is through that lens of making sure that the investments and programming and planning that we're doing now are not creating these same harms in the future. And so thinking about, what does equity mean in this space, to Commissioner Skinner's point about, what is most equitable for a community? Is it having the charging station there? Is it the access? someone mentioned that affordability and the cost of maintenance, cost of owning a vehicle is unattainable. And so how do we provide equitable solutions for clean mobility options, whether it's through that specific program, whether it's through public transit? And sometimes people get really upset because they think that we're just pushing, public transit for low-income folks that don't have a vehicle, but we really want to boost public transit so that it's better for everyone, so that those that don't have an alternative option can use it, but that people who would otherwise be driving in their single occupant vehicle can also make that choice as well. So just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. So I want to go ahead and just open up the floor now, maybe take about 6 or 7 minutes here for any comments. I know it's not a huge amount of time, but this has been such a robust discussion for these first 4 questions. So yes, the woman with her hand up right there. Yes, we'll wait for the microphone to come to you. 1 second.
So I kept thinking about the last question, how do you not leave any Californians behind? And I think when I look at this room, a lot of us are advocates. So my name is Jennifer. I work with the Sierra Club, and I'm on the ground all the time talking to community. And a lot of them couldn't attend today. They couldn't attend the virtual either. And when we center the most vulnerable, the most impacted, the people that unfortunately in their community, things like warehouses next to your neighborhood is normalized. How do we get to them so that meetings like this are normalized, where community is ready and know what CARB is and knows how to interact with the programs that y'all created? For example, SB 617 is flourishing in the Inland Empire. How do we get more youth to be aware of the impacts, and how do we ensure that they know why transportation is important, why they can be part of this conversation? And if you make programs that have their voices every time, you're actually gonna get what you need from them. Instead of us just telling you, we think they need this, they're gonna be the ones telling you they need this. But that community engagement needs to be more normalized. And I think that's one thing that's missing from the last question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, the gentleman right there in front. Yeah.
Thanks. Jay Verapalli, Legal Fellow, Communities for a Better Environment again. And thank you all again for spending the afternoon with us and hearing us out for this length of time. I probably can't talk through the EJ principles as well as the previous speaker there, but certainly uplift all of them. I think the last things I wanted to add, and they may have been covered to some extent, but like if we're trying to increase or strengthen programs for ZEV adoption, then I think we need to decrease how much we prop up those programs, like the low carbon fuel standard that prop up the fossil fuel industry and our over-reliance on refineries converting to biofuels that aren't much cleaner, that kind of playing adherence to the fossil fuel industry that threatens to pull out of California for an unfavorable regulatory environment or high taxes or high prices or whatever it is that they say that they'll threaten a refinery shutdown, and then we feel like we have to keep a refinery online longer and delay electrification. I think as much as those things are done in bad faith, we need CARB and its partners to operate in good faith on behalf of Californians, especially the most vulnerable. And then I'd add that I don't know if it's come up around transmission, but I feel like every time there's something like Scattergood, a hydrogen generation project for LADWP, one of the things that stops electrification, maybe not directly for ZEV for transportation, but even electric kind of generation that would be cleaner, is that there's inadequate transmission capacity to put solar and wind online, and then they'll blame CAISO or FERC or interconnection queues. I mean, like, I've been out of law school for a couple of years, and I feel like the same thing that is said then in energy law is said now, that there's a backup at the interconnection queue. And that's like really wonky and not super like kind of consumer friendly, but I think to the extent that CEC, CARB, and others can work with CAISO to whatever that would be to unburden the interconnection queue or make it less of a delay or burden, could potentially help get electrification moving quicker and hopefully be better for frontline communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and a question, let's see, comment there in the back, gentleman with the hat. And we might, if we can keep it succinct, we might have time to squeeze a couple in here. So if people can make their points briefly, that would be appreciated.
Thank you very much. On a personal side, I just want to say thank you for all the input, but also I was spurred on by two comments that were made. History, there's a lot of history of success. So back in the 70s, in the empire, I grew up, and catalytic converters, that was a process. Unleaded fuel, leaded fuel, catalytic converter came in, I think, 69, 70. They were developed, that technology was put on cars, and your 69, car was not taken out of California. Eventually, there were regulations that it had to, still be smogged. But my point being is there's a history, and so I would say we need to have the technology keep up with the marketplace. Definitely have clean air, but there's technology that's being developed, and if we push it too much, I don't know how many people can afford a $400,000 truck. I don't know if we can develop any more lanes and have backup of road backup because of taking a lane out. So all these are great discussions, but if we look back at the history of success in our industry, it can also be very valued. And I would just say slow down on some of the processes that are hurting the economy, but also we do want to have electric vehicles and technology that has clean air. So on a personal side, I do have a hybrid car, but I do want to say thank you very much for all that's been said here. There's a lot of technology, and I do like the gentleman who said to have a task force or a force that would help a group of people who have a lot more knowledge that could help develop and answer some of your questions. So thank you very much. I wasn't planning on standing up, but I was spurred on, so thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just have time for one more question. Anyone who hasn't spoken? All right, hand in the back there. You get the last comment. Again, not the last word, because we are open to additional feedback, but for this round.
Thank you. I don't think I'd ever get the last word anyways. My name is Matt Schraub. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Harbor Trucking Association. I think that, as we've watched so many rules evolve over the years, I think the critical thing is consistent enforcement of whatever laws the state of California is going to push forth, whether it's clean truck check, whether it's AB5, whether it's anything that's creating industry standards that is requiring the industry to adhere to. We talked earlier about this seeming unresponsiveness to the EJ groups, and with all due respect, you want to talk about unresponsiveness, feels like the industry, especially the trucking industry, the only way that we can get a point across is to sue the state of California, which nobody wants to do that. And so if we can create an environment of actual collaboration, this is a great start. I know the paper is going to come out, appreciate the executive order of trying to understand some of the challenges. But when we think about that boots on the ground experience for the industry, something like a dealer's advisory group, something like an industry advisory group that's listened to, that there is a process for participation where there's ideas that are brought forth that are seriously considered. One thing that we've always talked about, especially talking about leaving no California behind, is the fleet size requirements under HVIP. Those are gone now. I think we need to continue along those lines to bring everybody in, because the small fleets, they buy vehicles on the secondary market. That's how it's always been. And so where we can encourage incentive programs to utilize used vehicles. I know that was mentioned in some of the comments on the board here. So things of that nature. But at the end of the day, we can pass all the laws and the rules and the standards, but if they're not being enforced, they're not worth the weight of the paper that they're printed on.
All right, thank you. And if anyone's frustrated, you had your hand up, you wanted to make your comment, again, go to the California Resources Board ZEV forward page and you can submit your comment in written format. I'm going to turn it over to the panelists now for any final thoughts here on the day's discussion. So, and whoever is feeling motivated, feel free to jump in. Christine?
feel like Carb should have the last word. I don't know. They're the convener, so I'll kick us off for the closing remarks. Just want to thank Port of Long Beach for hosting us, and of course all of you in the room today for spending 4 hours sharing your pains, your joys, your suggestions. Really appreciate the time because we can't do this without you. These are listening sessions. They're not talking sessions. And I know we were able to engage in some dialogue and share some of the things that we were doing, but mostly was just here in listen mode. And we have a lot more work to do, but definitely appreciate and just want to thank you all for your time.
I'll just add my thanks to Christine's. Really appreciate everybody showing up and really appreciate the range of perspectives that were presented here, from community advocates, EJ advocates, to OEMs and dealers, to truckers, and really appreciate the Port and the City of Long Beach hosting us today. We will certainly spend a lot more time thinking about what you've all said, following up on what you've all said, and trying to get to the point the governor's asked us to do, to how do we continue to push forward in this environment our commitment to clean mobility and the myriad benefits that go with that. So again, thank you.
My thanks also to Port of Long Beach for hosting us, to Air Resources Board for pulling agencies together, and all the state agencies. This is quite rare. It is quite rare for state agencies to come together and we'll often have like a hearing on some regulatory process, but this is, as my colleagues have pointed out so far, a listening session, and this is the third one that was done in person, and there was a fourth one done virtually. So where it was really an invitation for us to sit back and listen to you. So I appreciate your showing up. You're giving us that input, not only verbally, but in responding. So we saw these comments online. You see these screens in front of us. We got to see, as you put in comments, we saw it in real time. And I want to thank the governor for the executive order and asking us to come back to him and to, give him some ideas, Governor Newsom, around what could move the needle now in accelerating EV adoption in California. When I say EV, I mean light duty, heavy duty, medium duty. We legitimately should celebrate our success. We are the leaders in ZEV adoption in the country. We are the reason, we, the state of California, are the reason that OEMs have, really, auto manufacturers really moved into the zero emission space. Now we're seeing China jump way ahead, and we're seeing some, other countries really moving, but hardly anybody was moving when we decided that we were going to push this. It was the state of California. So once again, we drove, it's a funny analogy, we drove and we took a leadership position and we got great results. And we want to see that leadership position continue. We want to see those results increase. And so I welcomed that executive order, and I welcomed the ability to step back and think about, all right, we have done some great programs. We're still going to do some of those, but what would we adjust now? This is not a time, I would say, for business as usual. So what can we adjust to really accelerate that adoption? And hearing from you helps us know, okay, where did we get it not so right? And what might we do to fix those? And then what else can we do? So really appreciate your input.
I'll just echo all the thanks, and also to the panel here, to Ethan for facilitating these dialogue sessions, and to the agency staff who pulled all this together. Finally, to all of you who provided input. At each one of these dialogues, we heard new things, and it's amazing that after 4 hours, on multiple occasions, that new ideas keep coming up, and I know that written docket can also help facilitate those ideas. So I really encourage you to continue to use that, provide that input to us. As I noted before, we're going to put this into a report to the governor, but it's not the end. We are committed to this outcome and continuing to drive forward on ZEVs. So these ideas that we hear from you will really help us do that. And I just want to offer my appreciation for all of your time and for staying with us all the way till 5 o'clock. So thank you very much.
Right. Well, on that note, I will echo the thanks, especially to the agency staff for putting a huge amount of time in behind the scenes, and also to all of you for taking 4 hours today out of your workday. This will conclude our in-person hearing, but as I said, and I've said repeatedly, plenty of opportunity for comment via the ZEV forward page. Thank you all so much. Travel safely back to wherever you're coming from, and thank you for your dedication.
And
on
thank
this
you,
important
Ethan.
topic.
Thank you for your leadership on this. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.